Chapter 1159 Xiao Wu has succeeded? Chapter 1159 Xiao Wu has succeeded. It's almost impossible, Xian Yi told Feng Sun. Back then, I tried for a month, but still failed at the last moment. Grandfather has never tried to teach me since. Grand Secretary Feng had made up his mind, and the look on his face had never been so stern. Feng Wu stood in the spacious martial arts arena with Go chess pieces covering the ground around her. Each piece was the size of a fingernail. A net had been hung up 100 meters away from Feng Wu, and each hole was the size of a chess piece. Behind the net was a bamboo tube with an opening as small as the human eye. Grand Secretary Feng gazed at Feng Wu. There are 99 chess pieces here. Kick each of them through the net into the bamboo tube. The bamboo tube was deep enough to contain all 99 pieces. That was to say, there was no room for error during this process. Feng Wu nodded. It might sound difficult, but she had confidence in herself. Taking a deep breath, Feng Wu raised her foot and kicked. The amount of strength she exerted the first time wasn't right. The chess piece flew through the net but missed the tube. Taking a deep breath, Feng Wu adjusted her breathing and went on practicing. The second piece hit the tube. The third one hit the tube again. It wasn't until the ninth piece. Click. There was a crisp sound. Everyone looked up to see a white chess piece shoot through the net like a streak of white light and fly toward the bamboo tube before there was a click. Thump! Wow! Feng Sun cried out in surprise. She did it! She did it! I didn't know little Feng Wu was this good. However, Xian Yi wasn't as naively optimistic as Feng Sun was. He kept his gaze on the thin bamboo tube. Crack! A cracking sound indeed followed. The white piece exploded in the tube, blasting it to pieces. The smile froze on Feng Wu's face. She knew it. It couldn't be that easy. Grand Secretary Feng stared at Feng Wu. Do you know what you did wrong? Tilting her head, Feng Wu gave it some thought and soon got it. I can exert enough strength, but I don't know where to stop. Without being able to control her own strength, she would never be able to master this stance. Grand Secretary Feng's face remained stern, but his eyes flickered for a split second. With his hands behind his back, he nodded coldly. Keep practicing. Right now, Grand Secretary Feng was no longer that kind, smiling old man that Feng Wu knew. He had turned into the strictest coach. Time ticked by, and Feng Wu was only just getting started. It was extremely difficult to achieve this task in one smooth move. She kicked 1 time, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Gradually, Feng Wu's face was streaked with sweat. Because of the huge consumption of spiritual essence, Feng Wu's face had gone ghastly pale, and her thin lips were almost bloodless. 2,000, 3,000. Feng Wu was soaked with sweat. Her legs were shaking and she was exhausted. Feng Wu's slim figure kept repeating the same movement, and it pained Feng Sun to see her like this. He turned to Grand Secretary Feng. Grand Secretary Feng, is it necessary to push her so hard? However, before Feng Sun could finish, Grand Secretary Feng bellowed, Keep talking if you want her to die. Feng Sun shut up immediately. Just then, there was a click. Before Feng Wu completely ran out of spiritual essence, she finally kicked a chess piece into the tube, which remained steady. It didn't even move, let alone explode. Xian Yi was dumbfounded. I can't believe it! Feng Sun was excited. Did Xiao Wu succeed? Chapter 1160 Breakthrough. Chapter 1160 Breakthrough. Xian Yi shook his head. She still has a long way to go before she can master the stance, but she's already making progress at a scary speed. When I was learning the stance, it took me 3 days to complete stage 1. Feng Sun stared at Xian Yi. This is only stage 1. Xian Yi said, What do you think? Flying Dragon didn't earn its reputation for its ability to simplify complicated moves and overcome the enemy with a single strike for nothing. Feng Sun looked sympathetically at Feng Wu. But look at Xiao Wu. She can barely stand on her feet. Xian Yi heaved a long sigh. He could see that too. The girl was soaking wet with sweat, as if she had just climbed out of a river. She was exhausted and was trembling uncontrollably. She was already like this. How was she supposed to endure the second and third stages, which were even more rigorous? After Feng Wu successfully kicked the first chess piece into the bamboo tube, she gradually had full control over her power and knew the exact amount of strength to exert. She was simply honing her skill with the other 98 chess pieces. As expected, after Feng Wu kicked all the pieces into the bamboo tube, she turned around, panting. She looked at Grand Secretary Feng with a relieved smile on her face, expecting some sort of acknowledgement. Grand Secretary Feng remained as serious as before. He said solemnly, "We're only getting started." Feng Wu was dumbfounded. Grand Secretary Feng nodded with a straight face. "You can back out now if it's too much for you." A resolute look appeared on Feng Wu's exquisite face. She clenched her fists. "No, I can do it." Grand Secretary Feng remained unperturbed, and said with a serious face, "Keep going then." Feng Sun wanted to say something, but hesitated. By now, Feng Wu was completely exhausted and her face was ghastly pale. One could tell at a single glance that she had given it her all. How was she supposed to keep going like this? However, a determined look flickered in Feng Wu's bright eyes. Feng Sun and Xian Yi were put to use in the second stage. Grand Secretary Feng let the two of them take turns to act as Feng Wu's training partners. Xian Yi went first. He stood in front of the bamboo tube, and what Feng Wu had to do was kick the chess piece so that it flew through the net and avoided Xian Yi before dropping into the bamboo tube. What that meant was that Xian Yi was acting as an extra obstacle. And a very difficult one. Feng Wu kicked the first piece. Click. Xian Yi hit it back. She kicked again. Click. Xian Yi hit it back again. And Feng Wu tried again. Over and over again. Time ticked by. Feng Wu's clothes were soaked with sweat and her legs felt like lead. She could barely lift them. But she was still repeating the same movement as if it had become instinct. The look on her face was very serious. And her moves were meticulous. After 1,000 hits, Xian Yi slipped slightly in his movements, and Grand Secretary Feng replaced him with Feng Sun. The training went on. After what seemed like tens of thousands of times of practice. Crack. Feng Wu stumbled forward, falling to the ground. She hit her forehead on a rock and blood oozed out right away. Feng Sun panicked. He was about to rush over to help her up, when Grand Secretary Feng cast a stern look at him. Crossing his hands behind his back, Grand Secretary Feng looked relentless. "If you don't want to learn, feel free to give up." Feng Wu lay on her stomach, feeling drained of all strength. The Tai formation had an endless supply of spiritual essence, but she was using her spiritual essence up way faster than it could be replenished. Feng Wu had continued to absorb spiritual essence from the spiritual stones and continued to outperform herself. Chapter 1161 The Teenager is Back. Chapter 1161 The Teenager is Back. Her vision went dark when she fell to the ground head first. She could see stars and her head was swimming. She couldn't even lift a finger. How she wished she could pass out just like this. She was so tired that she wished she were dead. But at that moment, a firm voice rang out in Feng Wu's head. "Do you want to live? Master this or you won't be able to defeat Xin Yuan Yi. You won't survive if you can't beat him." If she was dead, no one would bring her beautiful master back to life, no one would be there to protect her family, and no one would kill Zhou Qingluan. As long as she could breathe, she had to stand up. Feng Wu pushed herself up from the ground with both hands. Blood oozed out from between her fingers, and there were bloody handprints everywhere. And it wasn't just her fingers that were bleeding. Feng Wu's right foot was soaked with blood, which had seeped through her boot, painting it red. It was a frightening scene. A figure had appeared quietly on the wall when no one was looking. No one knew how long he had been standing there. There was a domineering look in his eyes, which could send a chill down one's spine. He kept his unblinking gaze on Feng Wu, and looked as intimidating as death itself. However, there was also a hint of pity in his eyes, and he even looked a little moved. Jun Linyuan knitted his exquisite straight eyebrows. He jumped off the wall and landed lightly on his feet. He then walked steadily toward Feng Wu on his long leg. "Let's continue." Biting her lip, Feng Wu stared at Grand Secretary Feng with a resolute look in her eyes. "Be Boss Jun." Feng Sun was the first to spot Jun Linyuan, and he cried out in surprise. Hadn't Boss Jun voluntarily locked himself inside the water dungeon as punishment? He still had those injuries on him. Jun Linyuan walked up to Feng Wu and raised his hand, but it never landed on her head. "You want to continue?" Even Jun Linyuan himself didn't realize that the expression on his finely sculpted face had changed. Other people might not know how tiresome or painful training aimed at breaking one's limits was, but he knew. All they knew was how fast he made progress and how omnipotent he was, but what they didn't know was the excruciating pain he had to endure over and over again to break through his limits during his cultivation as he pushed his body to the point of collapse. Therefore, when he saw Feng Wu in this state, even the Crown Prince, who had never let any emotions show on his face, was moved. Feng Wu struggled to look up. Right now, even lifting her head hurt excruciatingly. She saw an incredibly handsome face with deep-set features, well-defined lines, and a pair of brooding eyes. One look at his eyes and Feng Wu knew that he understood her. Many people pitied her and wanted her to stop, but he understood her. A faint smile appeared on Feng Wu's fair face. It was barely detectable, but was as bright as fireworks. "I want to keep going." With each word, she felt as if a blade was scraping the inside of her throat, but she still grabbed Jun Linyuan's hand and emphasized each word earnestly. Feng Sun, Xian Yi, Chaoga, and Qiuling were all there, and they were all calling out to her, telling her to stop, but she wouldn't give up. Jun Linyuan looked down at Feng Wu's hand. The teenage girl's hands used to be so soft and tender, but now all her fingers were bleeding and trembling uncontrollably. "I'm with you." Taking both hands, he sent a streak of warm spiritual essence from his fingers. It flowed into her body through her injuries. Feng Wu felt. Chapter 1162, A Touch-and-Go Situation 1. Chapter 1162, A Touch-and-Go Situation 1. A streak of warm spiritual essence flowed from the teenager's hands into hers through her bleeding fingertips. Feng Wu, who was barely breathing and looked like a withered flower, slowly revived, as if she had been watered with spiritual water. "Keep going." The teenager patted her head with his slender fingers, and his lips curled into a smile. Feng Wu was a little dumbfounded. But she soon came back to herself. Licking her lower lip, she nodded. "Yes." Grand Secretary Feng had been standing a few steps away from them the whole time and hadn't said a word since Jun Linyuan showed up. Feng Wu had complained to him quite a few times about how Jun Linyuan picked on her, and the old man had been thinking about finding a time to mention it to His Majesty. But now, seeing the way the teenager patted Feng Wu's head, Grand Secretary Feng had a strange feeling. With Jun Linyuan as her training companion, Feng Wu was even more efficient in her practice now, but that didn't mean that her pain was in any way reduced. The pain, the dizziness, and the hopeless state were all still there. Chaoga and Qiuling watched with teary eyes until they cried. More than once, they almost ran over to Feng Wu to wrap their arms around her bloody body and yell, "That's it. We give up." However, when they saw how hard Feng Wu was trying, they sobbed and couldn't say a word. Jun Linyuan's face was as breathtakingly handsome as ever. He kept his gaze on Feng Wu the entire time with a stern look on his face. Every now and then, a pitying look would flicker in his eyes. No one else noticed, but Grand Secretary Fong, who had been looking closely, was utterly surprised. Could it be? Was it what he thought it was? If that really was the case, the girl would never be able to get away from June Linyuan. However, Feng Wu couldn't see anything else at the moment. She was devoted to her practice and was giving it all she had, sparing no effort. Right up until the very last moment. Feng Wu kicked the last white chess piece into the tube. At that moment, Feng Wu burst into tears. Her legs gave out and she fell backward. Before her head hit the ground, the teenager rushed to her side to catch her, and he picked her up in both arms. He looked down at her. His lethal, threatening air was long gone, replaced by a gentleness that no one else had seen before. Seeing Feng Wu collapse into June Linyuan's arms, Chaoga and Qiuling were both worried sick. During Feng Wu's practice, Chaoga had tried to run to her a few times, but Feng Sun had stopped her each time. Now that the training was over, she finally dashed over like a shooting arrow. Xiao Wu! Xiao Wu! Chaoga tried to take Feng Wu back from June Linyuan. But the Crown Prince didn't even look at her. With Feng Wu still in his arms, he jumped onto the wall with light feet. Quickly, go with him. Feng Sun tugged at Qiuling and Chaoga. Go get some warm water and fresh clothes. An hour had passed after they cleaned Feng Wu up. How is she? Feng Sun stared at June Linyuan nervously. When will little Feng Wu wake up? June Linyuan knitted his fine eyebrows. It's hard to say. Boss June, are you leaving? Seeing that his leader was leaving, Feng Sun was a little nervous. June Linyuan glanced sideways at him, the look in his eyes brooding. Before he left, he gave the Fong Manor a long look. Despite its ordinary appearance, the house was equipped with a top-grade essence-gathering formation, which had abundant spiritual essence. He wondered what formation master had designed it. But June Linyuan was on a tight schedule and couldn't stay here any longer. Chapter 1163, A Touch-and-Go Situation 2. Chapter 1163, A Touch-and-Go Situation 2. Take good care of her. June Linyuan glanced at them sideways, and the look on his face reminded them of a god of death. His intimidating power spread out in the yard. The people of Fallen Star Yard only came back to themselves after June Linyuan left. Qiuling grabbed Chaoga's hand nervously and said in a tiny voice, Is His Royal Highness and Miss Wu? For a split second Chaoga thought the same. But she rejected the possibility right away. No, it can't be. But His Royal Highness carried Miss Wu back himself. Didn't the Crown Prince abhor the touch of other people? After some thought, Chaoga shook her head adamantly. Who knows what the hell is wrong with that Crown Prince? Anyway, it's all in your head. Qiuling said, All right. That's right. My sister will never like him. She's my sister and nothing else. The boy standing in the doorway spoke angrily with his cheeks puffed up. Feng Sun was lost for words. Xian Yi's mouth fell open. The two of them exchanged wry smiles. It seemed that Boss June still had a long way to go before he could win the girl's heart. However, the more pressing issue now wasn't winning the girl's heart, but would Feng Wu wake up before noon? Feng Sun said, It's dawn now and the sun is about to rise. Neither Feng Sun nor Xian Yi left. They stood in the yard and looked up at the dark sky. The air was as cool as water and both looked worried, even from behind. Xian Yi said, Yes. Feng Sun asked, Do you think Feng Wu can wake up before that? Xian Yi said, The chances are slim. Feng Sun heaved a long sigh. She worked so hard. After everything she put into this, it would be such a pity if she has to give up because she missed the stipulated time. This Xianyuan Yi really is something. He's given all of us a sleepless night. Feng Sun smiled bitterly. Back in the day, they wouldn't have wasted their breath on a nobody like Xianyuan Yi. Time crawled by. The night ended and the sun rose. As the streets got busier, the entire imperial capital seemed to wake up. However, Feng Wu still lay completely motionless, without any sign of waking up. The people of Fallen Star Yard were calm at first, but as time went by, they couldn't remain as unperturbed. Feng Sun kept running into Feng Wu's room to check on her. "Is she still not awake?" Feng Sun asked quickly. Qiuling was pale and was visibly worried. She shook her head. "We only have 2 hours left here." Feng Sun frowned. While Feng Sun was feeling worried sick, his mother had been summoned to court. The Empress Dowager frowned as soon as she saw Lady Northern Feng. "I heard that Feng Wu is in trouble again." Lady Northern Feng's stomach sank, and she wondered who had been saying bad things about Feng Wu in front of the Empress Dowager. She looked up at the Empress Dowager. On the Empress Dowager's left was none other than Empress Dugu, whereas concubine Oriole, the Emperor's favorite woman at the moment, was on the Empress Dowager's right. Despite her frustration, Lady Northern Feng put on a bright smile when she walked up to the Empress Dowager. "Your Majesty, has someone been telling you bad things about little Feng Wu again?" The Empress Dowager snorted. "I don't need to be told. She's done so many things that the news fly into my ears all on their own." "Your Majesty, you're so well informed. I'd love to hear about it." Chapter 1164, A Touch-and-Go Situation 3. Chapter 1164, A Touch-and-Go Situation 3. Lady Northern Feng didn't look like her tough self at all when she was with the Empress Dowager. Bending down, she gently took the old lady's hand and gave the latter her brightest smile. The Empress Dowager snorted, pointed at concubine Oriole next to her, and said in a disgruntled voice, "Even concubine Oriole here has been telling me about how your little Feng Wu has been bullying other people just because she has powerful connections." Lady Northern Feng didn't like the sound of that at all. "She has never done such a thing." The old lady frowned. "She hasn't? I heard that she was behind that filthy affair of the Xianyuan family." Lady Northern Feng tittered. "Your Majesty, surely you don't mean what happened between Lady Kai and Zhou Qinglu?" The old lady snorted. Lady Northern Feng chuckled. "I don't understand. Why is my Xiao Wu involved in the affair between Lady Kai and Zhou Qinglu? Did she force them to sleep together?" The Empress Dowager found that argument plausible. Empress Dugu shot a warning glance at concubine Oriole. The Empress had grown smarter. She would behave as nobly as an Empress should, and let concubine Oriole do all the dirty work for her. Concubine Oriole covered her mouth with a handkerchief. "Lady Northern Feng, everyone has been saying that Feng Wu set Lady Kai and young Master Zhou up. What happened was a trap." "Well, that's the truth, but do you have evidence? If not, just shut up," thought Lady Northern Feng. She found this concubine Oriole a pain in the neck. However, she would never lose her temper in front of the Empress Dowager. Holding the old lady's hand, Lady Northern Feng said in a soft voice, "I don't get it. Why would my Xiao Wu set Lady Kai and Zhou Qinglu up? She would have to have a motive, right?" The Empress Dowager was persuaded. Yes, one had to have a motive to do such a thing. Hence, the old lady looked dubiously at concubine Oriole. Could concubine Oriole say that it was because Xianyuan tried to set Feng Wu up first? Of course she couldn't. Before concubine Oriole could speak, Lady Northern Feng struck again. "Moreover, it's like you've said, Xiao Wu is a dumb girl without much cultivation capability. How can she frame the oldest daughter-in-law of the Xianyuan family in their own territory? Concubine Oriole, do you think that's possible?" Concubine Oriole smiled awkwardly and was about to speak when Lady Northern Feng went on. "Concubine Oriole says that my Xiao Wu had been bullying people because of her powerful connections. Who are you suggesting those connections are? Me? Does concubine Oriole think that I prompted Xiao Wu to do those things that night?" Concubine Oriole was about to explain, but Lady Northern Feng had already taken the Empress Dowager's hand and burst into tears. Your Majesty, I never knew that concubine Oriole has this sort of impression of me. I don't want to live any more. Things turned against them so fast that both concubine Oriole and Empress Dugu were speechless. Empress Dugu was used to this. After all, Lady Northern Fong hadn't remained the Empress Dowager's favorite for years for nothing. The Empress Dowager patted Lady Northern Feng's hand. You silly girl. That's nothing worth crying over. Lady Northern Fong said, Your Majesty, I feel so wronged. The Empress Dowager patted her hand and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She wasn't targeting you. Why do you feel wronged? I feel wronged for my Xiao Wu. She didn't do anything, but every time something happens to someone else, she's the one who's blamed. She had nothing to do with this whole Xianyuan business. Lady Northern Fong sounded even more aggrieved as she spoke. Plus, Your Majesty made her Princess Fong Wu yourself. Are you going to do nothing about all this slander? That jogged the Empress Dowager's memory. Lady Northern Fong was right. The Empress Dowager had given Fong Wu that title herself. Chapter 1165, A Touch-and-Go Situation 4. Chapter 1165, A Touch-and-Go Situation 4. Lady Northern Fong said, Your Majesty, she's my goddaughter who received her princess title from you. One ought to show her some respect out of deference to you. As the saying goes, you don't hit a dog without checking who its owner is first. They shouldn't have disrespected Your Majesty like that. Lady Northern Fong was doing all she could to pull the Empress Dowager to her side. That way, attacking Fong Wu would be attacking the Empress Dowager. Lady Northern Fong would like to see them try. As expected, concubine Oriole and Empress Dugu couldn't sit still after Lady Northern Fong said that. Because the lady was directly accusing them of disrespecting the Empress Dowager. Concubine Oriole left her seat immediately and knelt down in front of the Empress Dowager with a ghastly pale face. Your Majesty, I really didn't mean that. I was only trying to entertain Your Majesty with some gossip, I was told. I was only trying to cheer Your Majesty up. I didn't mean anything. Empress Dugu changed the subject in a hurry. Of course you didn't. It was nothing, really, but I heard that our crown prince flared up over a girl. In order to save Fong Wu, he cut off all 4 of old Master Xuanyuan's limbs, which is why we're talking about it. Well, concubine Oriole hadn't gotten to that part yet. As soon as Empress Dugu said that, the Empress Dowager's face darkened. What did you say? Despite her old age, she smacked the table so hard that she almost smashed it to pieces. Darting a taunting sidelong glance at Lady Northern Fong, Empress Dugu said to the Empress Dowager, Your Majesty, I heard that the heads of all the major clans protested and gave His Majesty pressure. His Majesty was so angry that he locked the Crown Prince in the water dungeon. The water dungeon? The Empress Dowager felt her head spin. The water dungeon. That was supposed to be a form of torture for felons. The water there went as high as one's chin, and the prisoners couldn't sit, sleep, or rest in any way, for they would fall down in the water and drown if they relaxed. How dare he keep that from me? How dare he? The Empress Dowager was infuriated. Empress Dugu went on tattling to the Empress Dowager. His Royal Highness is supposed to be an aloof, sensible person who sees any woman other than Your Majesty as a stranger. But he stood up for Fong Wu. Fong Wu, this is going to be your downfall. Let's see if you can withstand Her Majesty's rage, thought Empress Dugu with a malicious smile on her face. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she almost had a heart attack. Lady Northern Fong was flustered. Empress Dugu's attack was a very effective one. Not only did she mention the difficult situation His Royal Highness was in at the moment, she also pointed out that Fong Wu was the reason, and reminded the Empress Dowager that Jun Linyuan treated Fong Wu differently. Those 3 things together were enough to set the Empress Dowager off. What a malicious woman! If Lady Northern Fong wasn't here, Fong Wu really would be blamed for everything, and the Empress Dowager would probably send Feng Wu some poisonous wine and have the latter commit suicide by imperial order. Lady Northern Feng tried to explain immediately. Her Majesty the Empress has to be mistaken. Empress Dugu smirked inwardly, but her face remained composed. Isn't it the truth? All the ladies at the Xianyuan mansion that night said so. Lady Northern Feng snorted. But you weren't there that night. I was. She then turned to the Empress Dowager. Your Majesty, it was all my fault. Please punish me. The Empress Dowager looked at Lady Northern Feng in bewilderment and wondered why the latter was suddenly so serious. Lady Northern Feng said in a solemn tone, His Royal Highness did indeed take action that night, but it wasn't to save Feng Wu. He did all those things to save me. The Empress Dowager said, What? Lady Northern Feng started her little revenge. Your Majesty, you have no idea how arrogant that old man Xianyuan was. He was outrageous. Chapter 1166. No one challenges the authority of an emperor. Chapter 1166. No one challenges the authority of an emperor. Something went missing in his family and he had to search everyone. Lady Northern Feng sounded angry and aggrieved. And even that wasn't enough for him. He hated me, so he lashed out at Xiao Wu. He actually wanted to search Xiao Wu's memories with his soul power, said Lady Northern Feng between broken sobs. Your Majesty, you know the consequences of that. If one's memories are searched with soul power, they'll become mentally handicapped or even killed. The Empress Dowager shuddered. Lady Northern Feng went on. And he tried to do that even after the imperial edict was read, when everyone knew that Feng Wu had been made a princess by your Majesty. He was so unscrupulous, despising the authority of your Majesty and the Emperor like that. It wasn't like that. Actually, concubine Oriole tried to interject, but Lady Northern Feng wouldn't let her. She went on. Your Majesty, Xiao Wu was about to be killed, so of course I had to do something. The Crown Prince just happened to arrive at that moment, so I begged him to save Xiao Wu. That was why His Royal Highness took action. Seeing that the Empress Dowager didn't look as angry, Lady Northern Feng went on immediately. Your Majesty, you raised His Royal Highness yourself, and no one knows him like you do. Other people may spread baseless rumors about him, but I'm sure your Majesty knows that the Crown Prince isn't the type to meddle. His Royal Highness usually turns a blind eye to Xiao Wu. Why would he stand up for her? Why would anyone fabricate a lie like that? Lady Northern Feng was giving it all she had to save Feng Wu's life. The conversation might seem nothing more than a petty household matter, but such trivialities had gotten more women killed in the imperial palace than one could count. Lady Northern Feng was sure that if she didn't speak up for Feng Wu, the latter would be killed without a sound. After all, no one could challenge the authority of the royal family. Hearing Lady Northern Feng's explanation, the Empress Dowager's mood finally lightened slightly, and she let out a breath of relief. Lady Northern Feng then helped the old lady sit down. They had just taken their seats again, when there was a loud announcement. His Majesty the Emperor has arrived. Emperor Wu entered the hall, dressed in his bright yellow imperial robe. His gait was steady and even, and he gave off a naturally intimidating air as he walked. All the concubines bowed to him. Emperor Wu casually waved them off. He went over to the Empress Dowager in a hurry and asked anxiously, Your Majesty, what happened? Are you not feeling well? The Empress Dowager was a little short of air from her anger earlier, and before she could reply, Lady Northern Feng said, Her Majesty has delicate health to begin with, and someone upset her just then. That's why Her Majesty is like this. Emperor Wu flared up. Who upset Her Majesty? How dare they? Lady Northern Feng glanced at concubine Oriole. Well, no one would dare do it deliberately. It's just that Her Majesty heard about His Royal Highness being held in the water dungeon. Emperor Wu's face turned livid immediately. Who told Her Majesty that? He had given an explicit order that no one was to bring it up in front of the Empress Dowager. Emperor Wu scanned the crowd with his sharp, gloomy eyes. Concubine Oriole was almost scared to tears. She went down on her knees immediately and burst into tears. Emperor Wu glared at Concubine Oriole. Concubine Oriole had a beautiful voice. Therefore, Emperor Wu made her Concubine Oriole after taking her to bed. He had enjoyed her for a few days at this point, but didn't know that she could be so reckless. Get her out of here. She's banished to the cold palace. An emperor would never allow anyone to challenge his authority. In a mere moment, he had determined the fate of a common human being. Your Majesty! Chapter 1167 What Should We Do? Chapter 1167 What Should We Do? No matter how much Concubine Oriole pled, Emperor Wu didn't give her another glance, even though they had just shared a bed the night before. Your Majesty, help me! Help! Concubine Oriole cried and screamed like a crazy person, but Empress Dugu only gripped her handkerchief and looked away, acting as if she didn't know who Concubine Oriole was. Her Majesty the Empress told me to say all those things. Your Majesty, it was her. Infuriated, Empress Dugu gripped her handkerchief so hard that blue veins popped on the back of her hand. Your Majesty, what Concubine Oriole is saying is pure slander. Holding Emperor Wu's hand, Empress Dugu gave the Emperor a pleading look with her teary eyes. But Emperor Wu only waved her off. He only cared about his mother. When the Empress Dowager was finally able to breathe normally again, she looked up and stared at Emperor Wu. What did you do to my baby June? Even when she was having difficulty breathing, the Empress Dowager's first reaction was still to find justice for June Linyuan. Holding his mother's hand, Emperor Wu said, Your health is the most important thing right now. The Empress Dowager gasped. If you really care about my health, get baby June out of that place. Emperor Wu said, Well. The Empress Dowager threw off his hand and rose to her feet. Emperor Wu said, Your Majesty, where are you going? The Empress Dowager smiled grimly. I'm going to see my baby June now, and if you won't release him, I'll stay in the water dungeon with him. I'm going to take the punishment with my baby June. Emperor Wu was utterly dumbfounded. The Empress Dowager was usually a kind, amiable lady, but she could be hopelessly stubborn when June Linyuan was involved. Emperor Wu frowned. Your Majesty, the heads of all the clans are all on their knees outside the gate. How am I going to convince them if I don't punish him? He cut off all 4 limbs of the head of the Xianyuan family. The Empress Dowager said, That's because my baby June is talented. Emperor Wu was rendered speechless. Your indulgence is the reason June Linyuan has always been such an unruly son. He does whatever he wants and listens to no one else. Emperor Wu had made up his mind that he would teach his son a good lesson. He committed a heinous crime, but he can't give a convincing reason for it. It's preposterous, and I've had enough. This is a good time to teach him a lesson. Was it because of that girl, Feng Wu? The Empress Dowager frowned. Well, Emperor Wu snorted. I wish it was because of her. That way, at least he would have a reason. That calmed the Empress Dowager down a little. Emperor Wu glanced at Empress Dugu, hinting at her to change the subject so that the Empress Dowager wouldn't go on about June Linyuan. Empress Dugu's eyes darted around, and she was struck by an idea. She said, By the way, I heard that Feng Wu is going to die. The Empress Dowager said, What? Emperor Wu was equally surprised. Empress Dugu put on a long face. Well, that Feng Wu girl agreed to a duel to the death with Xianyuan Yi of the Xianyuan family, but given her capability, Feng Wu can't possibly defeat him. She's asking to be killed. With Xianyuan Yi? A battle to the death? Emperor Wu glanced at Lady Northern Feng. Lady Northern Feng bit her lip and nodded in resignation. That's true. The Empress Dowager heaved a sigh of relief. The old lady liked Feng Wu less and less by the day, and thought it was a great chance to get rid of Feng Wu for good. Lady Northern Feng had been watching the Empress Dowager the whole time. When she saw the look on the old lady's face, Lady Northern Feng's heart sank. No matter how hard she tried to explain on Feng Wu's behalf, the Empress Dowager already hated Feng Wu. This was going to be difficult. Chapter 1168 Her Majesty the Empress Dowager is here. Chapter 1168 Her Majesty the Empress Dowager is here. The Empress Dowager suddenly raised a hand and said to Granny Lon by her side, "Help me change." Granny Lon looked at the Empress Dowager in bewilderment. The Empress Dowager snorted. "I'm going to Imperial College." "What?" The Empress Dowager was going to Imperial College? Even Emperor Wu was baffled. He was about to say something, when the Empress Dowager snorted and waved her hand. "Your Majesty, don't bother. I have nothing better to do and the weather is nice, so I think I'll take a walk outside." Lady Northern Feng sighed inwardly. It seemed that the old lady really held a grudge against Feng Wu. Back at Imperial College, the arena for the duel was in a huge square between Blue Cloud Court and Universe Court. The Year 1 billboard was right next to it. The teachers knew that the Year 1 students wouldn't be in the mood for class because of the duel, so they simply gave them the morning off. The arena wall was about 10 meters tall and made from big, thick dark iron stone, which gave off a crude yet forceful feel. The arena was empty, but the area around it was packed. There were newbies from Blue Cloud Court, seniors from Universe Court, and some other people who had been given access because they were related to the event somehow, such as the Feng and Xianyuan clansmen. There was no shortage of onlookers. It was someone else dueling, but the onlookers were even more excited. It was almost time, but neither of the two contestants had shown up yet. Feng Sang, why is Feng Wu still not here?" Many knew about the relationship between Feng Sang and Feng Wu, so they all ran over to ask Feng Sang for information. "Is Feng Wu too scared to come?" Next to them, Gongsun Qing snapped, "Xianyuan isn't here either. Why are you only targeting Feng Wu? If you ask me, Xianyuan is the one who doesn't dare show up." Gongsun Qing was from the Gongsun family and too prominent for anyone to oppose. However, "Look, someone's coming." They turned around to see a streak of light flying across the sky. The next thing they knew, Xianyuan landed on the right side of the arena. He stood there in his white robe with a long sword on his back. Sword energy filled the air. Standing there with his hands behind his back, he gave one the feeling that he and the sword had become one. "What?" Two people in the crowd exchanged surprised looks. They were none other than Rong Shixin and Si Yuan, the first and second on the Year 1 billboard. Rong Shixin's eyes flickered. "If I'm not mistaken, there's been a clear improvement in Xianyuan Yi's capability." Si Yuan nodded with a dark face. Someone cried out next to them, "With Xianyuan Yi's capability now, he should be able to make it into the top 100 on that billboard, right?" Rong Shixin only smiled. "Top 100? You're underestimating Xianyuan Yi." "What do you mean?" Rong Shixin didn't say anything, and only smiled. Several people in the crowd were worried for Feng Wu, such as Jin Yuntao and his friends, who got along well with Feng Wu. Yuan Ming gritted his teeth. Xianyuan Yi made so much progress. What will Feng Wu do? Yi Zhou said, "I didn't see this coming. It's only been a day, and he's changed so drastically. There's no way that Feng Wu is going to win this." Yuan Ming said, "Losing won't be a big thing if this was any other day. She could always start again, but now..." Yi Zhou broke out in a cold sweat. "It's a duel to the death. What are we going to do?" The two of them then turned to Jin Yuntao in unison. "Did you send out the message?" Chapter 1169 False Accusations. Chapter 1169 False Accusations. When Jin Yuntao sent a message to World Tower the last time, the head of the tower moved Jin Yuntao up 2 floors right away. What would happen this time? Jin Yuntao smiled bitterly. This is a big deal. I'm sure His Royal Highness already knows, even if I didn't tell him. However, His Royal Highness hadn't responded. Xianyuan yi. Xianyuan yi. Xianyuan yi. The crowd kept cheering, which was quite electrifying and exciting. Just then, there was a commotion outside. Is Feng Wu coming? With that question, everyone turned their heads to the main gate, only to see the bright yellow color that was unique to the royal family walked into the courtyard. The color of the royal family? Which member of the royal family was here? Could it be a prince or a princess? All hail Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager? Everyone present cried out in surprise. The Empress Dowager was known to have little contact with the outside world, and very few people had seen her. What brought the old lady here? Mr. Feng didn't have to be here today, but then, the Empress Dowager was here. Chief Yu sent someone to find Mr. Feng, while she rushed over to greet the old lady. Of course, Xiao Yi wouldn't miss out on such a great opportunity. Quickening her pace, she followed the crowd as well. Your Majesty, Chief Yu bowed to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager only glanced at her, and continued walking without stopping. Rising to her feet, Chief Yu followed the old lady hastily with her head still lowered, so that she could clear the space in front of the arena for the Empress Dowager. Naturally, the Empress Dowager hadn't come on her own. Empress Dugu was with her, and so was Lady Northern Feng. Even the third princess, Jun Wuxia, was here as an onlooker. As soon as they took their seats, Jun Wuxia stared at Chief Yu. Where's Mr. Feng, the principal? Chief Yu broke out in a sweat and nodded repeatedly. Mr. Feng will be here in a minute. He'll be here. One couldn't begin to imagine how awestruck she felt. The women in front of her could be considered the most respected women in the empire. No one was as close to the seat of power as they were. Taking advantage of her special status, Jun Wuxia spoke to Chief Yu in a condescending tone. What now? It's time for the duel. Why isn't it starting? Chief Yu had a bitter taste in her mouth. These VIPs had arrived so out of the blue that she had been taken by surprise. We have 5 minutes before the start of the duel. Jun Wuxia waved her off. Go and tell them to hurry up. Chief Yu said, Yes, yes. Chief Yu left, but Xiao Yi stayed. Seeing the way the latter's eyes were darting around, Jun Wuxia couldn't help but frown. Who are you then? Xiao Yi bowed immediately, then smiled and spoke in a cloying voice. Your Royal Highness, I'm Feng Wu's teacher. Jun Wuxia knitted her eyebrows right away. Xiao Yi immediately saw that the princess here didn't like Feng Wu. Moreover, upon close observation, Xiao Yi noticed that the princess wasn't the only one who didn't like Feng Wu. The Empress Dowager and the Empress looked equally disgruntled. This is perfect. Xiao Yi sighed. But this Feng Wu, well, I don't know what to say about her. That tone. Jun Wuxia took the hint right away. She smirked inwardly, but asked immediately, What are you saying? What kind of student is Feng Wu? The Empress Dowager and the Empress are here. You have to tell the truth. Xiao Yi was here to make false accusations, so of course she would make use of this great opportunity. Chapter 1170 Untitled. 1170 Untitled. Of course, I'll tell the truth. Xiao Yi feigned a regretful tone. Miss Feng Wu has received a lot of complaints from her fellow classmates. Jun Wuxia was excited to hear that, but she still pretended to be confused. Really? Feng Wu isn't popular with her classmates? What's her problem? Fighting back her excitement, Xiao Yi said, I assume that you know that Feng Wu was admitted into the college with the highest mark. Jun Wuxia said, That's right. Not only did she receive the top mark, she also got full marks, which is unheard of. Xiao Yi smirked. But why didn't she dare take the ranking test after she got in, even if she got full marks? Jun Wuxia's eyes lit up. Are you saying that she cheated in the entrance exam? Qiao Yi waved her hands immediately. Princess, I didn't say that. That wasn't what I meant. Jun Wuxia threw a dirty look at Qiao Yi. She couldn't have made it any clearer, but she still tried to deny it. This Qiao Yi really was a piece of work. However, Qiao Yi seemed to want to say something, but hesitated. It's just that because of that, Feng Wu has never shown up on the billboard, which made some of the students question her ability. Jun Wuxia snorted. If she really has the ability, why didn't she dare take the ranking test? She must have something to hide. Jun Wuxia stole a glance at her mother and grandmother as she spoke. Empress Dugu was sipping tea from the cup she was holding, acting as if she had nothing to do with this. She hid her satisfaction over Feng Wu's predicament very well. The Empress Dowager, on the other hand, looked furious. Qiao Yi and Jun Wuxia exchanged looks, and reached a tacit agreement. What else has everyone been saying about this Feng Wu? Jun Wuxia tried to create more opportunities for Qiao Yi. Qiao Yi pretended to hesitate over the question, but said in the end, apart from that, I guess Miss Feng Wu is alright. Jun Wuxia smirked. What do you mean by alright? If there really is nothing wrong with her, why did you hesitate? Qiao Yi, you're facing the Empress Dowager and the Empress here. Are you trying to withhold information from them? Qiao Yi apologized immediately, then sighed. Actually, Feng Wu doesn't come to the college that often. School has been in session for a while, but as her class teacher, I've only seen her twice. The Empress Dowager's face darkened right away. Before, when Qiao Yi hinted that Feng Wu had cheated, the Empress Dowager had still found that statement dubious, but this information convinced her completely. How arrogant! The Empress Dowager snorted. Lady Northern Feng felt her throat tighten. She wondered what kind of grudge this Qiao Yi had against Feng Wu. Why was she slandering Feng Wu like this? Qiao Yi smiled bitterly. The last time I saw her, she almost beat a new student to death. She was so merciless. Jun Wuxia timed her questions perfectly. She asked, What? Feng Wu almost killed a classmate. That's right. That day, Qiao Yi described what happened the other day, interpreting it in her own way and focusing on how arrogant Feng Wu was. As a result, Mu Yaoyao sounded perfectly innocent in her narration, while Feng Wu was completely at fault. And the next time I saw her was a few days later. Qiao Yi looked like she was about to cry. Chapter 1171, Is She Too Afraid to Come? Chapter 1171, Is She Too Afraid to Come? That time, it was like a nightmare for me. I don't know how I'm going to teach such a student. Qiao Yi broke into tears. Jun Wuxia frowned. What happened? Qiao Yi said between broken sobs, This Feng Wu is so out of line. She insisted that she would become an independent day student, and as her class teacher, I didn't agree, so she slapped me. What? Not only Jun Wuxia, but even the Empress Dowager cried out in surprise. The Empress Dowager's face was livid as she stared at Qiao Yi with a ferocious look in her eyes. What did you say? As a student, Feng Wu hit her teacher? Qiao Yi put a hand on the cheek Feng Wu had slapped and nodded with a sob. She's so well connected that there was nothing I could do. Although I'm the teacher, I have to swallow the humiliation. The Empress Dowager snorted. All land under heaven belonged to the Emperor, and all within the land were the Emperor's servants. He was the ultimate boss. How dare someone as petty as Feng Wu act so arrogantly? At that thought, the Empress Dowager glared at Lady Northern Feng. She was convinced that Lady Northern Feng was the reason why Feng Wu was so willful. Before Lady Northern Feng could speak, Qiao Yi went on in her teary voice. Mr. Feng, our principal, has always been good to Feng Wu. He treats her even better than Mu Yaoyao, his own granddaughter. So, it was Grand Secretary Feng. The Empress Dowager frowned. Grand Secretary Fang was a well-respected and experienced minister who used to be the emperor's teacher. Even the Empress Dowager had to respect the old man, not to mention that Grand Secretary Fang had made another breakthrough and had become an even mightier cultivator. The Empress Dowager winced. Lady Northern Feng sighed inwardly. Poor Feng Wu. She hadn't even shown her face yet and these people were already slandering her like this. She worried that the Empress Dowager might finish the girl off as soon as she arrived. Your Majesty, please don't be mad. That's only one side of the story. We'll have to look more carefully into it if we want to find out the truth. However, the Empress Dowager sneered before Lady Northern Feng could finish. Yeah, you can stop trying to make excuses for her. Hearing that from the Empress Dowager, there was nothing else Lady Northern Feng could say. Jun Wuxia and Empress Dugu exchanged gloating looks. They had no idea where this Qiao Yi had come from, but she had just proven herself very helpful. How interesting! They made a mental note to reward her generously later. Seeing this, Jun Wuxia added fuel to the flames. Isn't it about time? Why is Feng Wu still not here? The Empress Dowager looked up at the arena and saw that it was indeed the case. With a long sword on his back, Xian Yuan Yi looked like he had become one with it. Sword energy filled the air. Standing on one side of the stage, he had a solemn look on his face. He was ready to fight and kill. However, the other side of the stage remained empty. The frown on the Empress Dowager's face grew bigger. That Feng Wu. Not only was she arrogant and domineering, she also disrespected her teachers and couldn't see beyond her nose. The Empress Dowager had thought that if Feng Wu had a pleasant temperament, she would turn a blind eye and let the crown prince have her as a concubine. But by the looks of it, that wasn't an option anymore. Jun Wuxia grinned. Is Feng Wu too afraid to come? A hush fell over the arena. Chapter 1172, Let us just go. Chapter 1172, Let us just go. Apparently, a lot of people were thinking the same thing. What about Feng Wu? What was she doing at the moment? She had used up all her energy the night before to master a single stance, Flying Dragon. She was completely drained and utterly exhausted. Feng Wu had thought several times that she was going to die. She couldn't even lift a finger. But whenever she felt that way, a generous amount of spiritual essence would flow through her veins. The morning sun shone through the window onto Feng Wu's translucent skin, casting little shadows under her eyes. Her long, thick eyelashes flickered, which reminded one of raindrops falling on butterfly wings, creating tiny ripples. Feng Wu opened her eyes slightly, her mind virtually blank at that moment. Soon, she came back to herself and bolted upright. Xiao Wu, you're awake. Both Chaoga and Qiuling were thrilled. Feng Sun was the most excited of them all. He had been pacing around the room in circles, checking the time. Now that Feng Wu had woken up, he was over the moon. Rushing over, he took Feng Wu's hand. Xiao Wu, you're really awake. How do you feel? Are you feeling all right? Feng Sun put a hand on Feng Wu's forehead to check her temperature. After all, Feng Wu had looked like a broken china doll the night before. She had been covered in blood, as if every bone in her body was broken. It had been the most wretched sight. However, Feng Wu's eyes were clear and bright, and her cheeks were flushed prettily. There was only one question that Feng Wu wanted to ask. What time is it now? Qiuling told her the time. Feng Wu paused for a minute, then realized what was going on. Wasn't that the time? My duel! Crying out, Feng Wu jumped out of bed, grabbed a robe, then rushed out the door. Xiao Wu! That was the only thing Feng Sun could utter before Feng Wu was out of sight. Feng Sun was distraught. Exchanging looks with Xian Yi, he said, Hurry up! Let's go! Feng Wu ran as fast as she could, but her legs could only take her so far. Little Phoenix also wasn't big enough to be her mount. Feng Sun caught up to her from behind and gave her a hand. Get up here! Seeing that she was running out of time, Feng Wu didn't have time to think. Taking Feng Sun's hand, she used the momentum to jump onto his horse. Hiya! The white horse galloped forward. Meanwhile, in Imperial College, it was almost the designated time, but Feng Wu was still nowhere to be seen. Everyone in the audience was talking. Is Feng Wu too afraid to come? If she knew that she was going to lose, why did she sound so confident in the first place? Well, what a waste of time. The entire year one was given half a day off for this. All the things we could have done with that much time. It wouldn't be such a big deal if Feng Wu lost today, but just deciding not to show up like this, what a shame. Fine then. We'll just leave. That's right. We should go. The crowd began to disperse. In her VIP seat, the Empress Dowager already looked furious. Suddenly, she got to her feet. Your Majesty! The Empress Dowager glared at Lady Northern Feng before the latter could say another word. Seeing this, Empress Dugu hurried over and offered her hand to the Empress Dowager. Chapter 1173 Asun. 1173 Asun. Resting her right hand on the back of Empress Dugu's hand, the Empress Dowager flipped her handkerchief and was about to leave. Lady Northern Feng frowned. That couldn't happen. After all the false accusations Qiao Yi made against Feng Wu, if Feng Wu was going to lose without putting up a fight, the Empress Dowager would think very poorly of the girl from now on. Lady Northern Feng was worried sick when she heard the swift clip-clops of a horse. Is Feng Wu coming? Everyone's eyes widened in surprise when they heard the sound, and they looked expectantly in the direction of the entrance. However, they only saw a teenage boy on a tall horse. Feng Sun. The crowd cried out in surprise, but looked disappointed. I thought it was Feng Wu. Sigh, I guess Feng Wu really is going to lose by not showing up today. What a shame. With a livid face, the Empress Dowager turned to leave. However, when the horse ran through the arena, a teenage girl jumped down from behind Feng Sun. She dashed forward and landed steadily in the arena. Feng Wu! Everyone cried out in surprise when they saw the girl, whose clothes flapped in the wind. She had delicate features, thick eyelashes, and bright, clear eyes. Standing there, she reminded one of a tender early morning bud. Feng Wu! Feng Wu! Feng Wu! Oh God! It really is Feng Wu! It really is her! She's actually here. She was bold enough to come. Everyone pushed forward in surprise. Meanwhile, in the VIP seat, the Empress Dowager didn't look any happier. Throwing a dirty look at Feng Wu, she turned to leave. She really didn't like Feng Wu at all. Feng Sun had sharp eyes, and he spotted the Empress Dowager immediately. He was shocked when he saw the displeased look on the old lady's face and how she was leaving. He gave Lady Northern Feng a bewildered look, and his mother pointed at Qiao Yi and Jun Wuxia, then shrugged. Feng Sun took the hint immediately. Your Majesty, how have you been? Jumping off the horse, Feng Sun crouched down in front of the Empress Dowager as he made a silly face. The Empress Dowager had looked rather angry before that. However, she burst out laughing as soon as she saw Feng Sun's funny actions. The old lady liked Feng Sun a lot. Come to think of it, since Lady Northern Feng was the Empress Dowager's goddaughter, Feng Sun could call the Empress Dowager his grandmother. Feng Sun grew up with Jun Linyuan. While the latter had always been a poker-faced boy, Feng Sun was the cheerful and happy one, and the Empress Dowager adored him. Seeing Feng Sun, the Empress Dowager didn't feel as vexed anymore. Rolling her eyes at him, she said, How old are you now? Get up already. Feng Sun threw his arms around the Empress Dowager's leg. Grandma, I'm never getting up if you leave now. I won't. I swear. The Empress Dowager patted him on the head, sounding a little grumpy. Aren't you too old for this? Asun is always 3 years old when your Majesty is around. Oh my, your Majesty, please sit down. It's going to be a very interesting duel. Rising to his feet, Feng Sun practically pressed the Empress Dowager back down into the chair. Had it been anyone else, the Empress Dowager would have been furious. However, the person just happened to be Feng Sun. The teenager had two slightly protruding canine teeth, which gave him a cheerful look when he grinned. No one could stay mad at a face like that. Next to them, Jun Wuxia and Empress Dugu were furious. Jun Linyuan finally wasn't around, but Feng Sun just had to decide to show up. Chapter 1174 Sure, what would you like to bet on? Chapter 1174 Sure, what would you like to bet on? They couldn't understand the Empress Dowager. She had so many real grandsons to choose from, but her favorite was this Feng Sun, who wasn't even related to the royal family. The Empress Dowager affectionately jabbed Feng Sun's forehead with a finger. Just like when you were little. Such a naughty boy. Feng Sun bent down, poured the Empress Dowager a cup of tea, and handed it to her with a smile. Your Majesty, have some faith in me. The duel later is going to be amazing. He then patted his chest. I promise. On my honor. The Empress Dowager was already appeased, and she rolled her eyes at him. Your honor? You lost all of that when you were still a boy. Qiao Yi had been standing next to them the whole time. She watched as Feng Sun cheered the Empress Dowager up, then looked at the teenager's exquisite, handsome face. She was instantly infatuated. He had the status, the looks, the capability, the whole shebang. Therefore, when Feng Sun glanced in her direction, Qiao Yi lowered her gaze shyly, and played with a lock of loose hair. Meanwhile, in the arena, Xianyuan Yi and Feng Wu stood on either side of the arena as they faced each other with cold looks. Xianyuan Yi smirked. For a moment there, I thought you weren't coming. Feng Wu smiled a little. Right back at you. Xianyuan Yi sneered, drew out the long sword on his back, and pointed it at Feng Wu. If you're that eager to die, I'll make it happen. After that, the teenager slashed the air with his sword, then charged at Feng Wu with tremendous speed. Feng Wu smirked and opened her right palm, and flaming sword appeared. The blade glowed with an orange light, and looked like a ball of flame. Go! The sword in Feng Wu's hand shone brilliantly. Clunk! The two blades clashed with a metallic sound. There were sparks everywhere. Xianyuan Yi stumbled back 5 steps, while Feng Wu took 7. That proved the difference in their capabilities. The audience watched this with their hearts in their throats. I never thought Feng Wu would be able to withstand Xianyuan Yi's attack. I thought she would fall in the first clash. But that first strike has already proven that Feng Wu isn't Xianyuan Yi's match. You don't say. Feng Wu took 7 steps back. And look at how violently her chest is heaving. That just shows that she's already given it everything she has. In the VIP seat, narrowing her eyes, the Empress Dowager gave the duel a long, displeased look. Shaking her head and rising to her feet, she wanted to leave. Boring. That was the only thing the old lady said. Feng Sun smiled at the Empress Dowager. I bet your Majesty that Feng Wu will win. What? The Empress Dowager was going to leave, but looked confused when she heard that. What did you say? Crouching down in front of the Empress Dowager, Feng Sun grinned. I bet that Feng Wu is going to win this duel. The Empress Dowager rolled her eyes at him. Nonsense. Feng Sun held the Empress Dowager's hand. Your Majesty, Feng Wu really is going to win. Would you like to make a bet? The Empress Dowager had the mentality of a kid. Hearing that, she said grumpily, Sure. What are we betting with? Feng Sun smiled. Your Majesty, if I win, can you maybe stop setting me up with girls from now on? I'll choose my own wife. Matchmaking just had to be the favorite pastime of the elderly. Chapter 1175 Look at Feng Wu's ranking. Chapter 1175 Look at Feng Wu's ranking. The Empress Dowager had tried to set Jun Linyuan up with girls before, but the Crown Prince was able to stop all her attempts with a single glare. Hence, the Empress Dowager had to make do with the second best option, and kept introducing young women to Feng Sun, so much so that Feng Sun had stopped going to court. The Empress Dowager threw a dirty look at Feng Sun. "You're so going to lose." Holding the Empress Dowager's arm, Feng Sun said, "That means that your Majesty will get to introduce me to as many girls as you want when I lose. Doesn't that sound nice?" The Empress Dowager jabbed his forehead with a finger. "You mean it?" Feng Sun nodded immediately. "Yes, of course, I'm very serious." The Empress Dowager was very confident. "Sure. I'll bet with that." The Empress Dowager believed that Feng Wu was definitely going to lose, and that there was no other possibility. In the arena, Xian Yuan frowned after the first strike. He said, "That was a surprise. I didn't think you would actually withstand that." Feng Wu gave him a half-smile. "I'm more than that. I can defeat you." Xian Yuan smirked. "How arrogant!" Feng Wu said, "I like to call it being confident." Xian Yuan didn't say another word. Turning the sword in his hand, he sent a violent blast wave at Feng Wu. It had such dense power that it twisted the air in front of Feng Wu. Feng Wu gradually fell back, while Xian Yuan moved closer. Rumble! Sword energy rained down and smashed Feng Wu in the back. How frighteningly powerful Xian Yuan was! Feng Wu spat out a mouthful of blood. Feng Wu spat out blood. Oh God! We were only just saying that Feng Wu can withstand his attacks, but she's already vomiting blood. So, Feng Wu is going to lose. All the members of the Xian Yuan and Feng families were in the VIP seats, with one family occupying one row on the left and the other on the right. The Feng family was led by Feng Yanfeng. Xian Yuan Zhe was absent for personal reasons, and Xian Yuan Yu was there to represent them. The Empress Dowager sat in the middle. Seeing that Feng Wu was already vomiting blood, the Xian Yuan family clapped their hands in excitement, and their voices went through the roof. The Feng family, on the other hand, Feng Yanfeng hadn't had much hope to begin with, but didn't expect Feng Wu to lose so quickly. He frowned. Lady Wang sighed in an affected manner. "It seems that Feng Wu isn't going to get out of this alive." "Well, she brought it on herself. Master, don't upset yourself over it." The Empress Dowager glanced at Feng Sun. "Look." Feng Sun remained unperturbed. "Your Majesty, it's just getting started. I'm sure Feng Wu will be able to turn things around." The Empress Dowager didn't buy it. Just then, someone cried out, "Look at the billboard!" The Year 1 billboard stood on one side of the arena, and the big letters on the big screen were bright red and very eye-catching. Everyone looked up at it, and the first thing they searched for was Xian Yuan Yi's name. Xian Yuan Yi used to be 298th on the list, but after that strike, he had become 199th. That's amazing! It's only been minutes, and he's already 199th. Xian Yuan Yi is as capable as they say. How long has it been since he joined us? His future is so promising. Check out Feng Wu's ranking, someone cried out. Feng Wu. Everyone was curious. Feng Wu hadn't even been on the list when she got into Imperial College. What about now? Chapter 1176, Second Stance of Fallen Star Swordplay, Dancing Dragon in the Moonlight. Chapter 1176, Second Stance of Fallen Star Swordplay, Dancing Dragon in the Moonlight. In the 900s? Her name wasn't there. In the 800s? Her name wasn't there. In the 700s? Her name wasn't there. They kept moving up the list, and soon, someone with sharp eyes spotted her name. Look, 258th. Feng Wu is 258th. Oh my, I never thought that Feng Wu could be so high up on the list. The billboard contained the names of students who had entered the college in the last 10 years. The newbies this year were mostly ranked between 900 and 1000. Feng Wu, on the other hand, had risen to 258 in one go. That was incredible. Xian Yuan Yi notwithstanding, Feng Wu's progress is pretty impressive. But she just happens to be up against Xian Yuan Yi. What good will her quick progress do her? She's never going to win. She's so going to die. Xian Yuan Yi will never let her live. What a pity! As the audience discussed it among themselves, those in the VIP seats were lost in their own thoughts. In the arena, Feng Wu's head was much clearer after she spat out the blood. Before she could react, Xian Yuan Yi's merciless blade was almost upon her. Wiping away the blood at the corner of her mouth, Feng Wu looked up with cold, killing intent in her eyes. She had only been probing so far, and now, she was going to reveal her true ability. When her beautiful master came back last time, he taught Feng Wu the first 3 stances of Fallen Star swordplay. Feng Wu had continued practicing the stances after her beautiful master left. She might not have reached perfection in them, but she had mastered the stances enough to handle Xian Yuan Yi. Holding flaming sword, Feng Wu swept it through the air, creating a resplendent arc. First stance of Fallen Star swordplay, Sword of the Other World. Suddenly, flaming sword seemed to be infused with an ancient, savage power. Instantly, fierce sword energy shot up, then turned into a shower of swords which rained down on Xian Yuan Yi like 10,000 arrows. OMG! The audience cried out in surprise. Oh gosh! Look at that shower of swords! Every blade contains such ferocious spiritual essence. I can't believe that Feng Wu had such a card up her sleeve. How is Xian Yuan Yi going to dodge that? He can't hide from all those blades. The onlookers clenched their fists and looked nervously at the arena. In the VIP seats, the members of the Xian Yuan family stiffened with anxiety. Those of the Feng clan opened their mouths in astonishment. The Empress Dowager stared at Feng Wu, and her eyes flashed with surprise. Xian Yuan Yi's face went taut, and the look in his eyes was very cold. So that's why you accepted the challenge. Xian Yuan Yi's sword moved faster than a streak of lightning, leaving behind a string of afterimages in the air. His sword was simply too fast. As the afterimages took shape, they also worked as a shield to cover him. It was as if he was holding an umbrella. Thump, thump, thump. The shower of swords smashed down on Xian Yuan Yi's sword umbrella like a raging storm. But the shower would end eventually. Soon, all the swords had disappeared, and Xian Yuan Yi reappeared from under the umbrella. However, Feng Wu had never planned to kill Xian Yuan Yi with a single strike. The battle had only just begun. Second stance of Fallen Star swordplay, Dancing Dragon in the Moonlight. Flaming sword flew out of Feng Wu's hand and shot toward Xian Yuan Yi like a dragon. It moved even faster than a shooting star. Roar! Dancing Dragon in the Moonlight guided the sword, which circled Xian Yuan Yi like a giant dragon. Chapter 1177 Untitled. Chapter 1177 Untitled. It kept picking up speed. The crowd had lost count of how many times the dragon flew around Xian Yuan Yi. The dragon seemed soft and loose when it was flying. However, when the stance took effect, the dragon suddenly tightened. Whoosh! Xian Yuan Yi was tied up in a bundle. Oh my god! Feng Wu can actually do that! Feng Wu is indeed worthy of her fame. She wasn't called a little genius for nothing. She's risen again. In the VIP section, the Xian Yuan family frowned and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The members of the Feng clan also frowned and looked equally bewildered. Lady Wang, Feng Lu, Feng Sang, and Feng Yiran opened their mouths in astonishment. They couldn't believe it. How was that possible? Feng Wu had only been a level 4 spiritual grandmaster when she revealed her capability. How long had it been since then? And she could already fight Xian Yuan Yi now. Exactly what level was she at now? Was she even human? Lady Wang and her family members looked at one another, overwhelmed with jealousy and frustration. Someone cried out at that moment, "Check out the billboard!" The billboard? What more surprising changes had taken place? Everyone looked up. It was true. Something astonishing had indeed happened. Xianyuan Yi used to be 199th, but had moved up to 180th. But Feng Wu was even more amazing. She had been 258th only a moment ago, but because of the 2 attacks, she had quickly risen to 199th. Feng Wu is 199th already? OMG! Didn't people say that Feng Wu got into Imperial College because she cheated, so she didn't dare take the billboard test? Then what's going on here? A lot of people were lost for words. That was right. They could lie to themselves before, saying that Feng Wu had gotten where she was because she had cheated, but they had just been proven wrong. The billboard was an independent system, and even Mr. Fong couldn't tamper with it. How could Feng Wu cheat the billboard? In the VIP section, Lady Northern Feng glanced at Xiao Yi with a smile. Didn't I hear someone say a moment ago that Feng Wu got in because she cheated? Whoosh. A lot of people turned their heads in Xiao Yi's direction. Among them, the Empress Dowager had the most piercing gaze. Because she had believed Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi flushed and regretted hanging around. Had she known this was going to happen, she would have left earlier on, instead of staying here. When she saw the questioning looks, Xiao Yi summoned up her courage and said, "Well, I heard some rumors from the students, so I." Lady Northern Feng smirked. So, a teacher can take a student rumor as truth. Is that how a teacher should act? Xiao Yi's face turned scarlet as she stood there, utterly humiliated. She wished the ground would open up to swallow her. Empress Dugu interjected with a smile. Feng Wu hid her capability so well. Even we didn't know about it, let alone Xiao Yi. She then added in a seemingly indifferent tone, "The girl is already quite capable, but she kept it a secret. I wonder what she's up to." The Empress Dowager had felt a little guilty for misjudging Feng Wu, but when she heard Empress Dugu, she frowned again. Chapter 1178 Untitled. Chapter 1178 Untitled. Seeing the stern look on the Empress Dowager's face, Empress Dugu looked pleased. Lady Northern Feng was about to speak, when the Empress Dowager waved her off. "Just wait and see." In the arena, Feng Wu had tied Xianyuan Yi up with Dancing Dragon in the moonlight, the second stance of Fallen Star swordplay. Xianyuan Yi's face darkened. He had expected Feng Wu to have something up her sleeve, but he hadn't expected that she would be this spectacular. The next moment, Xianyuan Yi directed his energy to his dantian, and he was covered in a red glow. He looked like he was on fire and was going to explode. Blue veins popped on his forehead and arms, and his pulse raced. Break! Instantly, Xianyuan Yi's body enlarged, and violent fluctuations of spiritual energy spread out from him like ripples. Thump! There was a loud bang. Dancing Dragon in the moonlight, which had been wrapped around Xianyuan Yi, exploded. Xianyuan Yi overexerted himself, and was injured by the exploding spiritual energy. Blood oozed out from the corners of his mouth. This Miss Feng Wu really is amazing. She forced Yi to do that. On the Xianyuan family's side of the VIP seats, Xianyuan Yu frowned and was lost in his thoughts. Xianyuan Yu had been there the entire time, and knew what Xianyuan Yi had experienced in that one day and night. That was why Xianyuan Yu was genuinely impressed by Feng Wu when he saw her performance. Xianyuan Yi stared at Feng Wu. "Is that all? Your ultimate move is so blah." Feng Wu smiled. "My ultimate move? You need to open your eyes." As soon as she said that, Feng Wu attacked a third time. Third stance of Fallen Star swordplay, Fatal Thunder. The first 2 stances were only trial runs, and Feng Wu never expected to defeat Xianyuan Yi with them. However, Feng Wu had high expectations for the third stance. Fatal Thunder. Feng Wu pointed her sword upward, and sword energy shot up into the sky. Immediately, spiritual essence ran rampant between heaven and earth. Streaks of lightning started to form above the sword. Soon, more lightning formed and flashed across the sky. The sound of thunder filled everyone's ears. The sky above the arena was covered in intersecting streaks of lightning, as if they had taken over the world. That scene shocked almost everyone in the audience. Among them, most of the audience were Year 1 students, newbies and seniors included. The newbies looked at one another with astonishment in their eyes. "I can't believe how amazing Feng Wu is. Do you remember how we used to provoke her?" As for the seniors, "Isn't she a newbie this year? Since when are newbies so terrifying? What are we going to do now?" There I was, thinking that I could kick them around a little, but the newbies this year are so scary. Feng Wu. She's made it into the top 200 on the billboard already. Most of the seniors haven't even reached that high a level on the list yet. Most of the people in the VIP section were more reserved and wouldn't let much show on their faces. However, they were all staring at Feng Wu's hand, which was holding that sword pointing upward. That world of thunder. She's only a spiritual grandmaster, but she can already create a world of thunder. That's unheard of. Even Xianyuan Yu, the representative of the Xianyuan clan, had to say that in amazement. The girl was going to have such a promising future. Luckily, thought Xianyuan Yu to himself, we made all the preparations last night. Otherwise, Xianyuan Yi would die in that world of thunder. Chapter 1179 Untitled. Chapter 1179 Untitled. In the arena, Xianyuan Yi stared at Feng Wu with a little smile. "You're so naive if you think you can kill me with this stance." Feng Wu smiled a little. "Really? Let's give it a try." As she spoke, Feng Wu lowered flaming sword, which had been pointing at the sky, then threw it out toward Xianyuan Yi. "Go!" Feng Wu cried out. As she spoke, streaks of lightning flashed in the sky, resembling a giant dragon. Clouds rolled in thick layers, and that lightning dragon charged downward. The pressure was almost unbearable. The area was filled with thunder energy. How formidable! Xianyuan Yu and Feng Yanfeng both jumped to their feet and stared at Xianyuan Yi. Feng Wu's performance astonished and impressed Feng Yanfeng. Just as all the thunder energy was about to smash down on Xianyuan Yi, he bellowed, "I'll take it all!" Standing where he was, he bent his knees to brace himself, then opened his mouth, which looked like a black hole. As everyone watched in astonishment, a streak of lightning shot into his mouth. Then a second, a third, and a fourth. They shot into his mouth like thin dragons, but he devoured them all. "How's that even possible?" Feng Yanfeng smacked the back of his chair. From what he could tell, Xianyuan Yi was still a spiritual grandmaster. Were spiritual grandmasters nowadays so scary? One of them could create a world of thunder, while the other could devour it. The audience erupted. "Oh God! Xianyuan Yi is even better at concealing himself. How terrifying! The guy can devour thunder and lightning. Look! The billboard!" Xianyuan Yi used to be 180th, but as he absorbed the spiritual energy, his name quickly moved upward. 170th, 160th, 150th, whoosh. When the list finally stopped changing, Xianyuan Yi's name was in 50th place. OMG! 50th! Xianyuan Yi is much higher up the list than many seniors who have been in Year 1 for the past 10 years. He's absolutely a genius. By then, Xianyuan Yi had devoured all the thunder. After the last streak went in, he wiped his mouth and said, "Yummy?" Feng Wu could tell that the energy was rampaging around in Xianyuan Yi so violently that it was threatening to burst out. Xianyuan Yi was obviously in pain, so much so that he was on the verge of losing control. Feng Wu could tell, from the popping veins on his neck and the cold sweat on his forehead. But somehow, the energy gradually calmed down. What secret did Xianyuan Yi have inside his body? Feng Wu narrowed her eyes. Staring at Feng Wu, Xian Yuan snorted. You've shown all your cards, but I'm just getting started. As he spoke, Xian Yuan waved his hand, and a green vine rose out of his palm. The vine! The audience cried out in surprise. That's Xian Yuan Yi's pet plant. It has barbed thorns, is poisonous, and can stun people. The vine seemed to be growing from Xian Yuan Yi's palm. Holding the vine, Xian Yuan lashed out forcefully at Feng Wu. The vine was like a whip filled with spiritual energy. Chapter 1180 Untitled. Chapter 1180 Untitled. How formidable! Shocked, Feng Wu dodged sideways. However, Xian Yuan would never let her off the hook that easily. 18 vine strikes. Holding his vine, Xian Yuan lashed out with power like an erupting volcano. Crack! 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 He whipped so hard that one would think he was going to break the vine. Feng Wu kept dodging, for she wasn't strong enough to fight the vine head-on. That vine was simply too formidable. Using Phoenix Dance, Feng Wu dodged the vine by running around the arena. Phoenix Dance consisted of intricate movements that Feng Wu's beautiful master had taught her himself. It was supposed to help Feng Wu run away from danger. It was true. Not many people could catch Feng Wu if she wanted to get away. Back then, Feng Wu had used Phoenix Dance to run away from Feng Sun. But now, she was in the arena. The arena was a square platform less than 100 square meters in size, which left Feng Wu very limited room to maneuver. Xian Yuan on the other hand, was becoming more ferocious. Probably because of his earlier frustration, he needed to get back at Feng Wu now, and was cracking the vine as loudly as he could. Feng Wu frowned and her face darkened. Xian Yuan had been following her so closely that he was catching up to her. Meanwhile, from the audience's point of view, the vine had almost hit Feng Wu across the back more than once. However, Feng Wu was able to dodge the vine with her unbelievable moves every single time. That was close. The narrow escape made the audience so nervous that they could hardly breathe. In the VIP section, Feng Yanfeng narrowed his eyes. Exactly what kind of secret had Feng Wu been keeping from everyone else? The 3 stances had already impressed him. Fallen Star swordplay? Since when did the Feng clan have such a formidable skill? If they did have it, then how could the clan have fallen so low? And then there were those incredible moves Feng Wu was using. Feng Yanfeng made up his mind. He was going to make Feng Wu tell him what that skill was. Right at that moment. Thud! There was a loud thump. Because all eyes had been on Feng Wu, everyone watched as that whip-like vine smashed down on Feng Wu's back. Ah! Feng Wu cried out in anger. That hurt. Instantly, Feng Wu felt as if her back had been cracked open, and she trembled as she broke into a cold sweat. The barbed thorns of the vine cut Feng Wu's skin open, leaving behind bloody gashes. Feng Wu could sense a strange toxin enter her body through the cuts and instantly enter her bloodstream. What was worse, Feng Wu felt dizzy. The pain, the toxin, and the dizziness. Anyone else would have collapsed by now, but Feng Wu wasn't just anybody. She was able to analyze the ingredients in the toxin as soon as she was hurt. She then took out a bottle of medicine and poured it into her mouth. If she didn't neutralize the toxin, she would lose her mobility. As the pale green antidote slid down her throat, Feng Wu's head felt much clearer. However, this slowed Feng Wu down. For cultivators like Feng Wu and Xian Yuan the smallest delay could have a great impact. Xian Yuan Yi's vine smashed down. It hit Feng Wu hard on the back. In an instant, Feng Wu was whipped 3 times. The stance was known as 18 vine strikes, and he had struck 12 times already. There were 8 more strikes to go. If he succeeded in hitting Feng Wu 8 times in a row, Feng Wu would never be able to withstand it. In her current condition, she would certainly be killed. It was obvious what Xian Yuan Yi's plan was. Chapter 1181 Untitled. Chapter 1181 Untitled. Xianyuan Yi was going to kill Feng Wu in the arena with the remaining 8 strikes. Smash! The vine made another cracking sound. Feng Wu had neutralized the toxin by then, and she swiftly moved out of the way. The vine ended up hitting empty air. Feng Wu, die. The vine suddenly split into 3, and attacked Feng Wu from 3 directions. Is that even possible? The audience watched with open mouths and cried out in astonishment. Many people began to steal glances at the billboard. Xianyuan Yi had risen to 50th place already. However, after he devoured the thunder energy and demonstrated the real secret of the vine, his ranking rose again. 40 to 30 to 20th. Oh God! Xianyuan Yi is 20th already. 20th. Meanwhile, Rong Shixin and Si Yuan, who were sitting in the audience, exchanged astonished looks. The top 20 Year 1 students were seated in the front row. All 20 of them were seniors. They had only been onlookers at first, but little did they know how stressful the battle would turn out to be. Right now, all eyes were on the person ranked 21st. His name was Ding Qing. Another student teased him. Ding Qing, you've dropped to 21st place. The person who had spoken was Chao Yu, who was ranked 15th. Clenching his fists, Ding Qing snorted with a grim look on his face. Chao Yu, don't be so quick to smile. Before you know it, Xianyuan Yi's name will be above yours. Chao Yu didn't think much of it. I think Xianyuan Yi has given it all he got to get to 20th place. It'll be very difficult for him to go higher than that. You know how difficult it is to move up the billboard once we've reached the level we're at now. Ding Qing snorted. I guess we'll wait and see. Rong Shixin and Si Yuan shook their heads. Chao Yu was only 15th, and they weren't all that confident in him. Feng Wu. Where's Feng Wu's name? Maybe she can even make it into the top 20. Everyone started looking for Feng Wu's name. They looked all the way up the list, and finally saw Feng Wu's name. She was 58th. Wow! Many cried out in surprise. They hadn't expected Feng Wu to reach 58th place just like that. This Feng Wu sure knows how to make her mark at the first go. Too bad Xianyuan Yi is still winning. Plus, judging by the way he's fighting, he's decided to kill Feng Wu. In the arena. Thump, thump, thump. Xianyuan Yi waved his vine like a whip, smashing it down at Feng Wu. Spiritual essence surged like a tidal wave. Feng Wu quickly dodged as she ran around with Phoenix Dance. But however nimble Feng Wu was, she would still be whipped every now and then. This Xianyuan Yi was abominable. Each time, the thorns on the vine would tear a piece of Feng Wu's clothes away. A while later, Feng Wu's back was almost bare. Feng Sun frowned and blue veins popped on his forehead. If Boss Jun knew about this, killing all the people in the Xianyuan family wouldn't be enough to vent his anger. But the Empress Dowager stopped Feng Sun. Stop right there. You're not going up to that platform. It's against the rules. Feng Sun knew that the old lady was right, but, removing his robe, Feng Sun threw it into the arena while he called out Feng Wu's name. Catch! Using the robe as cover, Feng Sun sent a blast of energy at Xianyuan Yi. Chapter 1182 Untitled. Chapter 1182 Untitled. The energy contained in the robe charged at Xianyuan Yi as he struck down with the vine again. Rumble. There was a loud sound. Xianyuan Yi felt as if his blood was boiling, and heat rose up inside him. The thunder energy that he had finally been able to suppress erupted once again. He could taste blood in his mouth. No, I can't let it show. Xianyuan Yi forced himself to swallow the blood back down. With how smart Feng Wu was, she had realized what Feng Sun's plan was when he threw the robe at her. She smiled a little when she saw the strange look on Xianyuan Yi's face. What happened next was quicker than words could describe. A dagger appeared in Feng Wu's hand, and she struck at Xianyuan Yi's right hand. It was none other than the dagger known as Purple Sun. Feng Sun had given her the dagger as a gift, and according to him, the dagger was from Jun Linyuan. The dagger was so sharp that if one were to blow a strand of hair at the blade, the hair would be cut in half right away. Xianyuan Yi had a very tough defense system that wouldn't break that easily. Normal daggers wouldn't even leave a dent on his skin. However, this was Purple Sun. Xianyuan Yi was using all his might to suppress the thunder energy that Feng Sun had stirred up, and was caught off guard. Thud! Feng Wu showed up behind him like a ghost, then jumped away as soon as her attack succeeded. Meanwhile, Xianyuan Yi stared at his right palm in disbelief. A chunk of flesh was missing. Shit! Where's my vine? After the initial shock, Xianyuan Yi was furious. Looking up, he stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Just then, Feng Wu had dug the vine out of his palm with a dagger, the root included. Blood gushed out of Xianyuan Yi's palm. His face turned livid. Meanwhile, the audience was watching this in disbelief. They couldn't understand how Feng Wu had been able to do that. It was so scary. However, the Empress Dowager gave Feng Sun a stern look. Rubbing his chin, Feng Sun smiled awkwardly. You sure threw her that robe in time. The Empress Dowager snorted. Feng Sun played dumb. Your Majesty, I can't have her bear her back in public, can I? After all, she's my sister. The Empress Dowager smirked. Not just the robe, right? Am I mistaken, or is that the Crown Prince's dagger? Feng Wu had the Crown Prince's dagger? Empress Dugu and Jun Wuxia exchanged looks, and their hearts raced. Feng Sun rubbed his chin with a wry smile. He could tell that the Empress Dowager was probing with that question. It seems that Her Majesty doesn't want Boss Jun to have anything to do with little Feng Wu at all. Poor Boss Jun. He has such a long way to go before he can get the girl, and that's going to be a tough journey. Feng Sun smiled wryly. Boss Jun gave Purple Sun to me a long time ago. Since they're going to fight to the death, and little Feng Wu is my sister, I thought that it was all right for me to give her that dagger for her own protection. There was nothing wrong with that, but the Empress Dowager still didn't like it. She pouted a little. You people are all taking Feng Wu's side. Feng Sun chuckled. Your Majesty, we only learned from you, because you always cover for those whom you're close to. Little Feng Wu is my sister. Of course I'll take her side. The Empress Dowager snorted. Issuing that imperial edict was the worst decision of my life. As for which edict she was referring to, everyone here had a perfectly good idea. Feng Sun knew that a good impression couldn't be created overnight. They had all the time in the world, and he wasn't in any rush. Chapter 1183 Untitled. Chapter 1183 Untitled. Look, Your Majesty, Xiao Wu dug that vine out. Ha ha ha, Xianyuan Yi looks so baffled. He was telling the truth. Xianyuan Yi was staring at Feng Wu, looking astonished. You must have a death wish. What infuriated Xianyuan Yi even more was that Feng Wu hadn't just taken the vine, she had done more than that. Somehow, she was able to plant the vine in her right palm. It only took Feng Wu a second to gain full control of that vine. Feng Wu smirked. Do you remember how you swaggered around in front of me with this vine? Well, you're going to know what an eye for an eye means. Holding the vine, Feng Wu aimed at Xianyuan Yi, then started her attack, using 18 vine strikes. When everyone saw Feng Wu's attack, they almost went insane. Oh God! Isn't that the 18 vine strikes that Xianyuan Yi used just then? Feng Wu took Xianyuan Yi's vine away, and is now using it against him? That's what that an eye for an eye was about. That's just. Everyone in the audience and the VIP section couldn't keep their eyes away from Feng Wu's right palm. Xianyuan Yi frowned. How was that even possible? 18 Vine Strikes contained a lot of complicated moves that one couldn't master with just a look, but Feng Wu was doing exactly that. How was that even possible? No one could answer that question except Feng Wu. What they did know was that things weren't looking good for Xian Yuan Yi at all. Crack, crack, crack. Feng Wu chased after him. With her phoenix dance, Feng Wu moved at a tremendous speed. Smack! With a cracking sound, the vine hit Xian Yuan Yi across the back like a whip. Arg! Xian Yuan Yi grunted, sounding furious. Feng Wu smirked. How did that feel? Unforgettable, isn't it? Xian Yuan Yi turned around and glared at Feng Wu with bloodshot eyes. He decided that he would never forgive her for taking his vine and whipping him. Feng Wu smiled. I'm not done yet. Xian Yuan Yi had no choice but to keep running. He roared inwardly as he ran. He couldn't understand how Feng Wu was able to make use of the vine right after she took it away from him, let alone learn the 18 Vine Strike. As a matter of fact, Feng Wu hadn't known that she could plant the vine in her palm at first. It was Little Phoenix who told her how to do it. Little Phoenix had been with Feng Wu's beautiful master much longer than Feng Wu had. There were things that only Little Phoenix could remember. As for how Feng Wu learned the 18 Vine Strikes, she had always been a quick learner who could learn a move after seeing it just once, thanks to the training her beautiful master gave her. Thump, thump, thump! The vine hit Xian Yuan Yi across the back, and blood splashed everywhere. The vine could make a person dizzy, but once Feng Wu had it, the vine could do much more than that. You poisoned the vine? Turning around, Xian Yuan Yi glared at Feng Wu with bloodshot eyes. Feng Wu said matter-of-factly, Yes, I did. So what? Damn you! Smack! Feng Wu hit him again. The audience wazzled dumbfounded. They were a little speechless, for Feng Wu had gained the upper hand again. The situation kept changing, and they could no longer tell who was stronger. It was still too early to say for sure. Chapter 1184 Untitled. Chapter 1184 Untitled. Check out the billboard. Everyone expected to see Feng Wu's name much higher up the billboard by now, and they were right. Feng Wu was 48th on the billboard already, and with the vine, she had become much more capable. Like Xian Yuan Yi, Feng Wu was quickly making her way up the list. 40th, 30th, 20th. The next moment, Feng Wu had surpassed Ding Qing to take 20th place. Shit! Ding Qing cried out in surprise. After Xian Yuan Yi, Feng Wu had surpassed him as well. Ding Qing hadn't seen that coming. Are these two people out of their minds? Grabbing the hand of the person next to him, Ding Qing bellowed in disbelief. She's 20th now. How can that be? The top 20 students were all sitting in the same row. None of them could utter a word. Even Chao Yu, who was 15th, could no longer utter a word. He looked stunned. Deep down, he was worried. Will these two people take my place? They shouldn't be able to. Xian Yuan Yi can barely fight back now. He's going to lose, and when that happens, he's going to die. He's never going to take my place. Chao Yu kept trying to persuade himself when, all of a sudden, there was a loud popping sound from Xian Yuan Yi's body. Rumble. A shock wave spread out from Xian Yuan Yi in all directions. What? The audience cried out in surprise again. OMG! Look! Xian Yuan Yi has made a breakthrough. I can't believe it. Xian Yuan Yi had been a level 8 spiritual grandmaster when the duel started, but he had just become a level 9 spiritual grandmaster. Oh God! That isn't all. He's still advancing. OMG! A capable opponent really brings out the best in him. Xian Yuan Yi is at the top of his game. Look, Xian Yuan Yi has reached perfection in level 9. Feng Wu is a level 7 spiritual grandmaster, right? Yes. She's 2 levels below Xian Yuan Yi. How is she supposed to defeat him? Oh gosh, Feng Wu is so going to lose. The audience felt as if their emotions were on a roller coaster ride. Chaoga and Xiuling had arrived by then, and were watching the duel with the rest of the audience. Given their connection to Feng Wu, they could have gotten some VIP seat. However, the Empress Dowager was here, so naturally, the college wouldn't let anyone else sit there. Seeing that Xian Yuan Yi had made an unexpected breakthrough, Chaoga was flustered. Oh God! This isn't good. What's Xiao Wu going to do? Xiuling was almost in tears. Miss Wu has already worked very hard. Is she going to lose? They wouldn't be so worried if it was just a regular competition. However, this was a duel. Xiuling and Chaoga held hands, both trembling nervously. In the VIP section, the Xianyuan family looked relieved. Of the members of the Feng family, some looked concerned, while others gloated. Feng Sun, who had been at ease at first, couldn't help but frown now. The Empress Dowager glanced at him, then smiled. See? What did I tell you? Feng Wu is going to lose. Feng Sun only smiled. We don't know that yet. The Empress Dowager snorted. Feng Wu is 2 levels below him. There's no way she's going to win, unless she still has something up her sleeve. Chapter 1185, Untitled. Chapter 1185, Untitled. Feng Sun thought, well, Feng Wu does have something up her sleeve, and your grandson trained her himself. Of course, Feng Sun wasn't going to tell the Empress Dowager that. Otherwise, the old lady would kill him first. Meanwhile, all eyes were on Xian Yuan Yi. That was awesome. Feng Wu is so going to die this time. But even if Feng Wu loses, she'll still have lost with honor. Lady Wang and her children exchanged looks, and all of them smiled knowingly. Finally, Feng Wu was going to die. They had been so frightened just then when Feng Wu suddenly turned things around and seemed to be winning. Luckily for them, they didn't stay frightened for too long. After the breakthrough, Xian Yuan Yi was covered in a blue light. It was a temporary effect right after a breakthrough, and his body was enhanced with spiritual essence. Surrounded by the fluctuations of spiritual essence, Xian Yuan Yi was so mighty that the space around him seemed to tremble. Staring at Feng Wu with a cold look in his eyes, Xian Yuan Yi smiled. Feng Wu, die. Holding his long sword with both hands, Xian Yuan Yi charged at Feng Wu, activating all his energy. One couldn't even begin to describe how intimidating it was. The spiritual essence rushed toward Feng Wu like a tidal wave, and gave off a tremendous amount of pressure. As Xian Yuan Yi closed in, Feng Wu began to lose ground. She struck out with the vine. Thud! It only took Xian Yuan Yi a second to crush the vine into 3 sections, as if it hadn't been giving him a hard time just a moment ago. OMG! The audience cried out in surprise. That's so scary. That's a powerful beast. Has Xian Yuan Yi gone nuts? Is a level 9 spiritual grandmaster so powerful? Is Feng Wu going to die? Meanwhile, Feng Wu felt a little defeated as well. She never thought that the difference between 2 levels would be so great. Thump! Xian Yuan Yi struck at Feng Wu with his sword. Feng Wu tried to dodge. In a normal situation, she should have been able to get away, but this time, her feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, making it impossible for her to move. Shit! The blade of the sword swung at Feng Wu as she cursed under her breath. Thud! The sword pierced Feng Wu from behind. Xian Yuan Yi had aimed for Feng Wu's heart, but at that critical moment, Feng Wu shifted, and the blade missed its target by a bit. However, thud! There was blood on the blade, which stained Feng Wu's chest. Almost everyone in the VIP section rose to their feet. Damn it! Clenching his fists, Feng Sun wanted to rush onto the platform. Feng Wu swayed from the stab to her chest, and looked like she could faint at any moment. Blood kept running down her chest, and soon stained her belly, her pants, and the ground. Feng Sun thought that he was going to lose his mind. "Sit down," the Empress Dowager bellowed, glaring at him. But, before Feng Sun could say another word, the Empress Dowager scolded him. "This is a duel," Feng Sun said. "But," the Empress Dowager said, "Feng Sun, you violated the rule once already." She usually called him Ah Sun, and would only address him as Feng Sun when she was really angry. That just showed how furious the Empress Dowager was. Of course Feng Sun knew that it was a duel. A person could only leave the arena after their opponent fell. No one was to interfere. That was the rule. Chapter 1186, Untitled. Chapter 1186, Untitled. The Empress Dowager was right. Feng Sun had helped Feng Wu once, and another go would be inappropriate. But, in the arena, the power Xian Yuan exerted after his breakthrough was terrifying. Leaping up, he aimed at Feng Wu's back, then kicked. Thud! Feng Wu was already on the verge of falling. In that instant, her body flew forward despite herself. Whoosh! Thud! Feng Wu fell to the ground on the edge of the platform. "Damn you!" Chaoga and Qiuling were so angry that their eyes were bloodshot red. Xian Yuan was more than capable of kicking Feng Wu down from the platform. That way, Feng Wu would lose, but she would live. He had obviously done it on purpose. He had made sure that Feng Wu landed on the edge of the platform, just to torment her. Everyone could tell, for Xian Yuan didn't try to hide his intention at all. However, no one could get up on stage and help Feng Wu. Feng Wu fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood, which was so thick that it almost seemed solid. Xian Yuan charged at Feng Wu when she spat out the blood. He jumped up, then swung down with his long sword. Right now, with the murderous energy around him, he reminded one of the god of death. Even the sky seemed to darken. The light dimmed and the pressure was so heavy that it was hard to breathe. "Stop!" the audience kept crying out. Feng Wu had done an amazing job today, and was every bit the genius she was supposed to be. It would be such a shame if she was killed like this. But the duel was between Feng Wu and Xian Yuan. With Feng Wu losing ground, Xian Yuan got to decide if she lived or died. "Stop!" Xian Yuan sneered. The clouds seemed to turn darker, as if the sky was wailing for Feng Wu. Xian Yuan showed no mercy. The sword in his hands made a shrill sound as it absorbed spiritual essence at an unbelievable speed. Die! Terrifying spiritual essence spread out from Xian Yuan before he injected it into his sword. The blade hacked down at Feng Wu's forehead. He was so aggressive. And he looked unstoppable. "No!" Many cried out and couldn't believe what was going on. Was Feng Wu going to die? Was the genius girl really going to die? At that critical moment, thump! All of a sudden, a stone flew in out of nowhere and smashed into Xian Yuan's eye. It was so out of the blue. And at an impossible angle. Caught off guard, Xian Yuan was hit in the eye. "Ah!" Xian Yuan was surprised, and he bellowed at the top of his lungs. The stone made a big bloody hole in his face where his eye used to be. Blood gushed out. It hurt. Xian Yuan almost passed out from the pain. Seizing the opportunity, Feng Wu scrambled to her feet. Even so, blood was still flowing from her chest wound. Almost everyone was astonished by the sudden change. "Oh God, Xian Yuan's eye is bleeding. What was that? How did Xian Yuan lose an eye?" Most people shook their heads in bewilderment. But Feng Wu's people knew, and they were pleasantly surprised. It was Flying Dragon. That was the stance Feng Wu had used. Feng Wu had exhausted her spiritual essence the night before and had almost died in order to master this stance. Xian Yuan was as fierce as ever. After pressing some pressure points to stop the bleeding, he opened his remaining eye. The look in it was as sharp as a blade, and he exploded with ferocious spiritual energy. Chapter 1187 Untitled. 1187 Untitled. How dare you destroy my eye? Die. Holding his sword, Xianyuan Yi charged at Feng Wu. Feng Wu turned to run. With Xianyuan Yi chasing her, Feng Wu ran as fast as she could. Are you trying to run away from me? In your dreams. Xianyuan Yi smirked, and a terrifying force erupted from inside him. Go. The sword left his hand as it shot out at the back of Feng Wu's head at a tremendous speed. The crowd watched as the sword was about to reach Feng Wu. Thump! A stone flew out of nowhere again, hitting the blade. The impact caused the sword to veer slightly. Seizing the opportunity, Feng Wu leapt and stepped onto the blade. The next second, another stone came out of nowhere, shooting at Xianyuan Yi's other eye. What happened next was quicker than words could describe. Thud! Thud! 3 stones, 6 stones, 9 stones. More stones flew at Xianyuan Yi in a never-ending stream. It was Flying Dragon, the stance that Feng Wu had practiced the entire night. And the stance had been improved by Jun Linyuan himself. Moreover, Feng Wu had added a formation skill to it. It was no longer the original Flying Dragon, but an enhanced version. Xianyuan Yi, who had been winning before this, was cornered by Feng Wu's Flying Dragon formation and kept getting hit. The audience was rendered speechless. No way! Oh my God! What happened? What's going on? Everyone found it hard to believe, for just a moment ago, Xianyuan Yi had been winning. He had stabbed Feng Wu in the chest with his sword, and she was bleeding out. She could barely stand up. How could she have turned things around in her state? No. They simply wouldn't believe it. This Feng Wu, even the Empress Dowager, who had been convinced that Feng Wu was going to lose, opened her eyes wide and watched in disbelief. All the members of the Feng family kept their unblinking gazes on Feng Wu. Even Feng Yanfeng clenched his fists in excitement, not to mention Lady Wang. Fallen Star swordplay. Phoenix dance. And now this Flying Dragon formation. He hadn't expected Feng Wu to know so much. This girl was a family treasure. Feng Yanfeng made up his mind and decided that once this was over, he would make Feng Wu hand out all those things. Check out the billboard. Immediately, everyone looked at the billboard. Because the ranking was the most direct reflection of their capabilities. OMG! Just by looking at the two of them, you would never have known. Everyone had thought that these two people would be very lucky if they could make it into the top 100. But they had reached that goal a long time ago already. They had also made it into the top 50. Then the top 20. Feng Wu is in the top 10 now. So is Xianyuan Yi. Oh God! Chao Yu was dumbfounded. He had thought that he was safe, being 15th and all. The last thing he expected was for Feng Wu and Xianyuan Yi to both make it into the top 10. By now, Chao Yu had already fallen to 17th place. They're lunatics. Clenching his fists, Chao Yu didn't know how to describe these two people. Meanwhile, Xianyuan Yi was losing ground to Feng Wu. He stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Chapter 1188 Untitled. Chapter 1188 Untitled. How was that even possible? He was so much more powerful than Feng Wu since she was 2 levels below him. How could Feng Wu overpower him like this? But this formation was so terrifying. The stones seemed to be as numerous as the stars, and he couldn't tell where they came from. There was no pattern to it at all. Thump, thump, thump. Xianyuan Yi dodged as quickly as he could. However, every time he thought he would make it, he would be hit by another stone. They were hitting him on his legs, body, chest, head. The stones were flying at him at impossible angles, and in the slyest way. They seemed to be targeting his most intimate parts. They were on a stage. Xianyuan Yi was so mad that he wanted to tear Feng Wu into pieces. However, the angrier he got, the more flustered he became, which only made him clumsy and more prone to getting hit. Thump, thump, thump. Xian Yuan swore that his body was bruised all over. There probably wasn't any uninjured part left on his body. But Feng Wu was still closing in on him. There was nowhere for Xian Yuan to hide, and he was soon covered in blood. Ah! Xian Yuan grunted in pain. Stones fell like a downpour, and they were getting more accurate at hitting their target. Thump, thump, thump. In the end, Xian Yuan could barely stand up. He knew that he was going to die if this went on. In the audience, everyone watched with open mouths. Feng Wu, she's able to force Xian Yuan into a corner like this. What's that stance? How can it be so awesome? If I'm not mistaken, that's Flying Dragon, Mr. Feng's famous move, isn't it? I didn't know that Grand Secretary Feng taught her his most famous stance. He must see great potential in her. Poor Xian Yuan. As powerful as he is, he's still inferior to Feng Wu. Xian Yuan proposed this duel with Feng Wu himself, but now, he's losing. Talk about digging one's own grave. Everyone in the audience was talking excitedly. Many in the VIP section were watching with wide, astonished eyes. The people of the Xian Yuan family frowned nervously. Many of the Feng clan frowned as well, such as Lady Wang and her children. Gritting her teeth, Lady Wang exchanged anxious looks with her children. How could Feng Wu be winning? She didn't deserve to. How can she be? Lady Wang was so mad that she almost bit her tongue. Feng Lu clenched her fist. What an awful day. Why won't Feng Wu die? At the center of the VIP section, the Empress Dowager stared at Feng Wu with a brooding look in her eyes. She seemed to be lost in thought. Feng Sun grinned. Your Majesty, it seems that you're going to lose the bet. The Empress Dowager rolled her eyes at Feng Sun, then snorted. Just admit it. Are you the reason that she made all this progress? Feng Sun shook his head. That was Grand Secretary Feng's work. Not to mention that the princess is a talented and hard-working girl. Why are you so surprised that she'll defeat Xian Yuan? He had almost exposed Boss June, judging by the old lady's attitude. If she knew about the help Boss June gave Feng Wu the night before, she would be so mad that she would probably have Feng Wu killed. In the arena, Feng Wu was still gaining ground. Xian Yuan kept falling back, and was on the verge of losing. Xian Yuan's life was quickly being depleted, as if it was going down a drain. 50%, 40%, 30%. Chapter 1189 Untitled. Chapter 1189 Untitled. As much as they hated to admit it, it was clear that Xian Yuan was going to die. He was going to be defeated by Feng Wu, the so-called good-for-nothing. However, Feng Wu had never let her guard down even once. She would stay vigilant as long as Xian Yuan was alive. It seemed that Xian Yuan only had moments to live when... Damn it! He stared at Feng Wu. Do you think you can frighten me? Feng Wu smiled. I don't care if you're frightened or not. I'm going to kill you today. Xian Yuan smirked. You want to kill me? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. As he spoke, he waved his hand and unleashed a streak of cold spiritual essence. The terrifying fluctuation spread out from Xian Yuan toward Feng Wu, moving so fast that she had no time to react. Shit! Feng Wu's stomach lurched when she sensed the intimidating energy. How frightening that spiritual essence was! And that pressure was so scary. Xian Yuan no longer felt like a spiritual grandmaster anymore, but a spiritual elder. How did that happen? Feng Wu frowned and her face darkened. She had expected that Xian Yuan would have something up his sleeve, but this was much bigger than she thought. Just then, someone cried out in surprise. Hey! Check out the billboard! Whoosh! Instantly, all eyes were on the billboard. The rankings on the billboard changed rapidly as they watched. The previous changes were already very drastic, but now... Xianyuan Yi's name was still moving upward. 9th, 8th, 7th. Rong Shixin and Si Yuan's pupils contracted. They had thought that the two of them would be the last people affected by this fight today, for they were first and second on the billboard, and they had been there for a very long time. It had been 7 or 8 years since anyone was able to challenge their positions. But now, Xianyuan Yi had suddenly become 5th on the billboard. No, he was still rising. How was that even possible? That was crazy. The scarier thing was that Xianyuan Yi was steadily making his way up the list. No! Si Yuan cried in astonishment. This isn't happening. Si Yuan had been quite confident before this, but he had just taken a heavy blow. Standing ramrod straight, Rong Shixin prayed inwardly. Please stop. Stop right now. But the system didn't seem to hear his prayer because, after surpassing Si Yuan, Xianyuan Yi made it to the top of the billboard. Thud! The billboard itself shook violently at that moment. OMG! Holy crap! That can't be true. Oh God! Shit! Xianyuan Yi is first now. What should Feng Wu do? Instantly, all eyes were on Feng Wu, for Xianyuan Yi's abrupt rise in ranking was so scary. It made the fight that had happened so far look like child's play. If Xianyuan Yi can do that, why didn't he do so right at the beginning? Feng Wu would never have stood a chance if Xianyuan Yi had fought like this earlier. That's right. He wouldn't have lost an eye if he had been like this all along. Exactly what was going on? Everyone was baffled. How frightening! Chapter 1190 Untitled. Chapter 1190 Untitled. Xianyuan Yi is insane. Feng Wu is so dead. Instantly, everyone gazed at Feng Wu with sympathetic looks in their eyes. Talk about every dog getting its day. And all the cards which Xianyuan Yi had up his sleeve. How many more secrets did he have? Feng Wu, die. Just then, formidable spiritual energy erupted from Xianyuan Yi, and there was a murderous look in his eyes. He exploded with a strange energy. Instead of using a sword, he pointed at Feng Wu with his finger. Instantly, the space in front of Feng Wu twisted. How savage! Feng Wu felt fear that she had never felt before. She immediately retreated. But the energy from Xianyuan Yi's finger followed her everywhere. Thud! Feng Wu dodged the first and second strikes, but couldn't get away from the third. Whoosh! With a white flash, the streak of energy aimed at Feng Wu's eye scraped against her cheek. It cut her cheek open. Feng Wu touched her face, and her hand came back bloody. The audience cried out in surprise as well. Luckily, Feng Wu had dodged in time. If she had moved any slower, she would have lost an eye. Thump! 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 Xianyuan Yi's finger followed Feng Wu however she turned. She kept losing ground and was in an awkward predicament. She narrowly escaped several times. The direct attacks missed her and she got away with just scratches. The audience who had been sitting rose to their feet, and those who had been standing were on tiptoe. Everyone was so nervous and on edge. Is Feng Wu going to die? Why is Xianyuan Yi suddenly so powerful? Who's going to live and who's going to die? Some of the audience didn't really care who lost or won. They were only here for the atmosphere. However, as events unfolded, they experienced a gamut of emotions, and were utterly intrigued. They now desperately wanted to know how this duel would end. Everyone was so curious about exactly what kind of change had taken place in Xianyuan Yi's body. So was Feng Wu. She had never expected Xianyuan Yi, whom she had almost defeated, to rise again and fight like a junior spiritual elder. How frustrating! Thump! Xianyuan Yi's finger came down from above and jabbed Feng Wu in the back. Arg! Feng Wu cried out in surprise and fell forward despite herself. Thud! There was a bloody hole in her back. It was made by Xianyuan Yi's finger. With a malicious grin, Xian Yuan said, "Feng Wu, go to hell." As he spoke, he raised a leg and stepped down hard on Feng Wu's back. Feng Wu was already in pain from her injuries, and the foot on her back only made her dizzy. She spat out a mouthful of blood which she had been trying to keep down, spraying the air with a bloody mist. "Ah!" Everyone cried out in astonishment. Feng Wu was going to be stomped to death. Xian Yuan ground his foot, as if it contained enough power to crush heaven and earth. Crack! It was the sound of bones breaking. The sound was so creepy and blood-curdling. Feng Wu spat out another mouthful of blood. "Xiao Wu!" Chowga turned pale. Clenching her fists, she tried to jump into the arena. However, the platform seemed to be surrounded by an invisible shield, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get in. "Feng Wu, hang in there, may God favor you." Gong Sun Qing, whose life Feng Wu had once saved, pressed her hands together and mumbled to herself. "Feng Wu, hang in there. Hang in there." Chapter 1191 Untitled. Chapter 1191 Untitled. Jin Yuntao and his two friends were praying for Feng Wu as well. Xian Yuan didn't immediately kill Feng Wu, for he enjoyed the process of slowly torturing and humiliating his enemy. He wanted to crush her bit by bit. By then, blood was gushing out of Feng Wu's mouth and had gathered around her head. Her clothes were stained completely red. Fresh blood was streaming out of her body, and she looked like she was taking a bloodbath. It was a ghastly sight. "Feng Wu, stand up! Stand up! Feng Wu, don't give in. You can do this! Feng Wu, hang in there!" Numerous people cried out all at once, calling Feng Wu's name. The only thing Feng Wu could feel was how dizzy she was. Her vision went dark and she could see stars. And she could hear people calling her name. Gradually, Feng Wu regained consciousness. She opened her eyes with much difficulty, before narrowing them again. When she really thought about it, Feng Wu immediately saw why the whole thing seemed so odd. There was no way that Xian Yuan could have made so much progress in such a short time. This power came completely out of nowhere and, previously, Xian Yuan would have killed her without hesitation when he got the chance, but now, he was humiliating her the way a cat played with a rat. Thud! He jabbed his finger into Feng Wu's back again, making her shudder. She felt as if an electric current was running through her, and she teared up at the pain. No, she couldn't let him do this to her. She would die. The greatest thing about Feng Wu was that the more critical a situation she was in, the calmer she became. But her calm wouldn't help her now. Xian Yuan raised a leg and kicked Feng Wu away. Thump! Feng Wu was kicked into the air before she fell back down to create a human-shaped crater in the ground. It hurt. Feng Wu vomited more blood, feeling like she was in pieces. Every bit of her body hurt and she could hardly breathe. It seemed to be a hopeless situation for her, and it reminded her of when the Zhou family destroyed her true phoenix blood. At that moment, Feng Wu recalled the Zhou family and Zhou Qingluan and her hatred of them, as well as her beautiful master, and even Jun Linyuan. "I can't die here." She decided that she had to live, no matter how impossible it seemed. Xian Yuan started marching toward Feng Wu. Seeing that, everyone held their breaths for Feng Wu, who was in such pain that she could barely breathe. All of a sudden, Feng Wu seemed to reach an epiphany, as she saw through life and death. The next moment, she felt the spiritual essence around her grow thicker, before it poured into her body. That was... Is she making a breakthrough? Xian Yuan sounded amazed. But he didn't think much of it. Even if Feng Wu made a breakthrough, she would only be a level 8 spiritual grandmaster. Compared with him, a junior spiritual elder, she was nothing. However, the audience was utterly amazed. "This is spectacular! Who would have thought that after Xian Yuan Feng Wu would make a breakthrough as well? Now they're even. Let's see who's going to win." However, Xianyuan Yi only smirked. Feng Wu, do you think that a breakthrough will solve your problem? I'm telling you, no way. As Xianyuan Yi spoke, a long sword appeared in his hand. Wait. I hereby announce that I, Xianyuan Yi, will kill Feng Wu here in this arena today. Saying those words in his mind, Xianyuan Yi attacked. Chapter 1192 Untitled 1192 Untitled. However, everyone was crying out at that moment. Look, Feng Wu is a level 8 spiritual grandmaster now. OMG. A level 8 spiritual grandmaster. Feng Wu is amazing. Many cheered in the audience, but a lot of people in the VIP section looked relaxed. The people of the Xianyuan family smirked. She was a mere level 8 spiritual grandmaster, which was nothing compared with Xianyuan Yi. Strange spiritual essence exploded in the arena, and energy erupted from Xianyuan Yi's fists. It shot at Feng Wu with a rumble. The air in front of Feng Wu twisted with a crackling sound, as if big boulders were tumbling down. Shit! Everyone cried out inwardly. They were so sure that Feng Wu was going to die this time. Thump! Xianyuan Yi's fist smashed into Feng Wu, sending her flying backward. She flew in an arch in the air, before crashing down. Thump! Many people covered their eyes involuntarily. Was Feng Wu dead? Surely that had been enough to kill her. Feng Wu lay there, motionless and covered in blood, as if she was already dead. Xiao Wu! Chaoga rushed toward the arena as if she had lost her mind, but the others stopped her. Feng Sun was worried sick. If anything happened to Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan would be so furious that he would slaughter the entire crowd here. Xianyuan Yi, do you have a death wish? Feng Sun roared and rushed toward the arena. Stop him! The Empress Dowager bellowed. But, before Feng Sun could say another word, the Empress Dowager said angrily, It's a duel, and no one is to interfere. But Jun Linyuan really would lose his mind if Feng Wu was killed. Feng Wu was still lying motionless in a pool of her blood, when spiritual essence started rushing into her body. Was that the convergence of spiritual essence? Everyone stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Was she having another breakthrough? To their astonishment, there was a crackling sound in the air from the gathering of spiritual essence during Feng Wu's breakthrough. Oh God! Am I seeing things? Feng Wu is. Everyone was already astonished by the way Xianyuan Yi had broken through, but now, check out Feng Wu's ranking. Feng Wu had been 20th before, but now she was making her way up the list. 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. Many were looking forward to seeing how far Feng Wu would rise, and even hoped that she would rise beyond Xianyuan Yi. All the members of the Xianyuan family opened their eyes wide and were on edge. But in the end, Feng Wu stayed in second place. According to the system, Xianyuan Yi was still more capable than Feng Wu. Many in the audience sighed when they saw this. Xianyuan Yi's face twisted. Staring at Feng Wu, he struck at her with a fist, sparing no effort. He believed that the mercy he had shown Feng Wu earlier had provided her with readily exploitable loopholes. Rising to her feet with much difficulty, she pointed at Xianyuan Yi with a fair hand. Who are you? She asked the question in a cold voice. What? Everyone else looked at Feng Wu in bewilderment, wondering what she meant. Xianyuan Yi smirked. Are you just realizing it now? It's too late. As he spoke, he attacked Feng Wu. The spiritual essence in his palm seemed powerful enough to crush heaven and earth. Chapter 1193 The Last Turnaround 1. 1193 The Last Turnaround 1. Just when everyone was convinced that Feng Wu was going to be killed. A level 9 spiritual grandmaster. Feng Wu was covered in spiritual essence, as if she was shielded by a strong wind. Oh God! Feng Wu has become a level 9 spiritual grandmaster. Why don't people want to admit that Feng Wu is a genius? She's the best. She's already a level 9 spiritual grandmaster. Look, Xianyuan Yi hit Feng Wu. Rumble. The strength of the attack that was rushing toward Feng Wu reminded her of a tidal wave. She was doomed. The duel really was going to be over. Even if Feng Wu could fight like a level 9 spiritual grandmaster now, there wasn't much she could do, because Xianyuan Yi's power was too domineering. However, to everyone's disbelief, at the last moment, the energy that had been aimed at Feng Wu did an impossible U-turn and rushed toward Xianyuan Yi. Feng Wu was unscathed. Xianyuan Yi's face turned livid. What was going on? Xianyuan Yi was the person who had initiated the attack, but why did it turn on him? Xianyuan Yi tried to control the power, but realized that he could no longer do so. How could this be? Xianyuan Yi was flustered and at a loss. Dodge! A cold voice rang out in Xianyuan Yi's head. Xianyuan Yi felt a numbing sensation in his scalp and shuddered, but he calmed down right after that. The voice belonged to none other than old Master Xianyuan, who had all 4 of his limbs cut off by Jun Linyuan. It turned out that the old man realized that he didn't have much longer to live, so he condensed his cultivation achievement into a soul ball which Xianyuan Yi then put inside himself. As long as Xianyuan Yi didn't refine the ball, his grandfather's soul would stay with him. The old man had remained silent earlier, for Xianyuan Yi's life hadn't been in danger. However, at the last moment, he never expected a girl like Feng Wu to fight like a level 9 spiritual grandmaster. She didn't seem like a year 1 student at all. In order to keep Xianyuan Yi alive, the old man began to instruct him secretly. This wasn't right. With her acute senses, Feng Wu was able to detect another type of energy inside Xianyuan Yi, which was what was directing him now. The stance which Feng Wu used just then was called an eye for an eye, which was part of Flying Dragon. It bounced Xianyuan Yi's attack right back at him. Without hesitation, Feng Wu closed in on him. At the old man's instruction, Xianyuan Yi dodged with great precision. For a moment, the atmosphere in the arena was very tense. Everyone stared at the 2 people on the platform, not daring to look away for a split second. Because they could see that the duel was almost over. Feng Wu was finally catching up to Xianyuan Yi. The next moment, she shot up into the air, and spiritual essence rained down on Xianyuan Yi like a downpour. Boom! Feng Wu threw punches at Xianyuan Yi with all her might. Ah! Xianyuan Yi cried out in pain. Die! Feng Wu kept hitting him and didn't try to hide her killing intent at all. She had an inkling that if she didn't kill Xianyuan Yi now, she would be giving him an opportunity to kill her later. Thump! 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 As her punches landed, a storm seemed to sweep across the arena. Spiritual essence filled the air, and made a lot of people feel suffocated. Chapter 1194, The Last Turnaround 2. Chapter 1194, The Last Turnaround 2. Thump, thump, thump. Feng Wu's fists kept landing on Xianyuan Yi's forehead, chest and back. Ah! Xianyuan Yi kept vomiting blood and could barely stand up. So, is Feng Wu going to win? Xianyuan Yi is going to die today, is that it? I would never have thought. Poor Xianyuan Yi. Feng Wu is so scary. In the VIP section, even the Empress Dowager couldn't help but lean forward and clench her handkerchief, to say nothing of the members of the Zhuo and Feng families. Their attention was firmly fixed on the arena. This Feng Wu is an interesting girl, thought the Empress Dowager to herself. She had been able to turn things around in a situation like this, which was beyond everyone's expectations. Even the Empress Dowager, who had disliked Feng Wu since the beginning, had a slightly different opinion of the girl. However, despite the audience's confidence, Feng Wu was feeling less and less sure about herself. Where was that strange energy? How did it disappear so suddenly? Did it give up on Xianyuan Yi? Or was this the momentary lull before a storm? Whatever. Feng Wu flipped her hand and Flaming Sword appeared. It was unfortunate that it was only Flaming Sword. Fallen Star Sword would have been so much more powerful. Flaming Sword glinted as Feng Wu swung it through the air. The sword made a humming sound. It slashed Xianyuan Yi's back open from his right shoulder down to the left side of his waist. It was such a long gash. The cut was so deep that one could see the muscles under the skin. The tip of the blade even scraped the bone. Ah! Many people cried out in astonishment, and some girls covered their mouths involuntarily. The scene was too gory to watch. They all thought that Xianyuan Yi was about to be killed, but a strange transformation was taking place inside Xianyuan Yi. Old Master Xuanyuan's eyes flickered as he said grumpily, "Hand your body over to me." Xianyuan Yi was in so much pain that he wasn't even able to cry, so he immediately said yes. Old Master Xianyuan said, "Close your eyes and don't try to fight back." Xianyuan Yi nodded. Rumble. With a slight change in spiritual essence, Xianyuan Yi's grandfather took over his body. Feng Wu. Die. Old Master Xianyuan hated Feng Wu to the core. He believed that the girl was the cause of everything. Jun Linyuan got angry because of her, and as a result, Old Master Xianyuan had all his limbs cut off. Now that he had a chance to kill Feng Wu, of course he wouldn't let it slip through his fingers. Hence, he took the matter into his own hands at the risk of being exposed. Roar! As soon as the old man took over, a savage energy erupted from Xianyuan Yi's body. Boom! The old man turned around and struck out with his fist. The power was tremendous. And it was invincible. How terrifying! The next moment, Feng Wu was sent flying into the air. What? Everyone was astonished. They had thought that Xianyuan Yi was going to die, but this spiritual essence just came out of nowhere. If he had the ability to throw Feng Wu off, why did he hold back before? That was so strange. Finally, you're out. Feng Wu's eyes flickered coldly as energy poured out of her body. Feng Wu, you're going to die here today. Controlling Xianyuan Yi's body, Old Master Xianyuan acted like a savage. Thump! He threw another punch at Feng Wu's face. Feng Wu was sent flying into the air again. The audience was speechless. Chapter 1195, Untitled. Chapter 1195, Untitled. The audience was speechless. They had been astonished more times today than in their entire lives. Xianyuan Yi had been winning at first, before Feng Wu turned things around. However, Xianyuan Yi gained the upper hand again, and the whole process kept repeating itself. They were so confused that they no longer knew what would happen next, because the situation had turned around too many times. However, thump! Xianyuan Yi's fist smashed into Feng Wu's forehead. She fell to the ground, and this time, she couldn't get up. How terrifying that power was! Lying in a pool of blood, Feng Wu kept vomiting blood. She wanted to move, but was too weak to even lift a finger. She stared blankly at the sky. A flock of white birds flew across the sky in a line. In the distance, the green trees were full of vigor. Feng Wu didn't want to die. However, Xianyuan Yi had taken diabolical action. A flash shot out of his fingertip, aimed at Feng Wu's forehead. Feng Wu closed her eyes and despaired. This time, she really didn't know what to do. Right at that moment, a godlike figure descended from above. He had deep-set features, a sculpted face, and beautiful eyes. However, frost seemed to cover his handsome face. He reminded one of a formidable king who was born to rule this world. He was none other than Jun Linyuan. Oh God! It's His Royal Highness. Why is His Royal Highness here? Even the Empress Dowager couldn't remain seated. She stood up abruptly. Empress Dugu, Jun Wuxia, and the others all rose to their feet in disbelief. They watched as Jun Linyuan stood there in the arena and made a complicated hand seal with his slender, jade-like fingers. His skin looked translucent in the sunlight and his fingers gave off a murderous energy like the sharpest blade. What's His Royal Highness doing? Why is His Royal Highness on stage? The Xianyuan family watched as Jun Linyuan stood next to Feng Wu and struck at Xianyuan Yi. The hand seal that was as fierce as a cold blade was directed at Xianyuan Yi. Seeing that, the members of the Xianyuan family felt their stomachs lurch. I thought no one else was supposed to interfere in this duel. The question was directed at the Empress Dowager. The old lady had stopped Feng Sun for that reason a while ago. However, the world underestimated how much the old lady doted on the crown prince. Where her grandson was concerned, the Empress Dowager was no different from any other common old lady. She indulged her grandson to a fault. Hence, the Empress Dowager was displeased when she heard the question from Xianyuan Yi. Shut your mouth! She flared up. Lady Northern Feng's mind finally calmed down at Jun Linyuan's arrival, and she said helpfully, I'm sure that His Royal Highness has a reason for it. The Empress Dowager nodded in satisfaction. Meanwhile, in the arena, Jun Linyuan swiped his slender fingers through the air. Rumble! He caught the streak of light that had shot out from Xianyuan Yi's finger. Xianyuan Yi frowned and cursed under his breath. The next moment, that white light shot out of Jun Linyuan's hand and headed for Xianyuan Yi's forehead. Of course, Xianyuan Yi wasn't the real Xianyuan Yi now. The body was controlled by old Master Xianyuan. Thud! The white light shot into Xianyuan Yi. Immediately, Jun Linyuan pulled, and something which resembled a tiny baby appeared in his hand. Chapter 1196, Untitled. Chapter 1196, Untitled. It resembled a fruit with a human face. It had no hands or feet, and only had an old man's face. It was none other than its old master Xuanyuan's soul. Someone cried out in the audience. Oh God! Why does Xianyuan Yi have his grandfather's soul in his body? Can someone please tell me what this is about? I see. Xianyuan Yi was able to turn things around when Feng Wu was winning because of old Master Xianyuan. Holy crap! I thought it was supposed to be a one-on-one duel. Old Master Xianyuan was controlling Xianyuan Yi's body? That can't be fair. Poor Feng Wu. She was tricked. Hearing the discussion, the Xianyuan clansmen looked ashamed. Old Master Xuanyuan's soul glared at Jun Linyuan. He bellowed in a shrill voice, Jun Linyuan, let go of me! The crown prince acted as if he couldn't hear the old man. Lowering his voice, the old man roared into Jun Linyuan's ear, don't for 1 minute think you can hide your secret from me. You're in love with... A grim look flashed across Jun Linyuan's handsome face. Whoosh! He crushed the old man's soul in his palm. No! Old Master Xuanyuan's scream gradually faded into nothing. Everyone of the Xianyuan clan was astonished. They were so shocked that they almost forgot to breathe. That was so terrifying. The crown prince was like the god of death. He had crushed old Master Xuanyuan's soul as easily as crushing an ant. After that, he turned to look at Feng Wu. Looking at Feng Wu, who was lying in a pool of blood, Jun Linyuan was going to help her, when Feng Wu struggled to her feet and supported herself with her sword. She waved at Jun Linyuan. I'll take it from here. The teenage girl was covered in blood, but her limpid eyes had unswerving determination in them. She looked as fragile as she was resolute. Jun Linyuan frowned a little, for he could sense that Feng Wu wanted to keep her distance. He had broken his shackles to get out of the water dungeon, only to be turned down here. Face dark, Jun Linyuan turned to leave. He thought about leaving like this, but couldn't bring himself to do so. Changing directions, he headed for the VIP section instead. In the VIP section, the Empress Dowager no longer cared about the duel. Her baby June was the only person she could see. "My dear." The Empress Dowager had only uttered 2 words, before the Crown Prince raised a fair hand. He then stood there with his hands behind his back, the lower hem of his clothes flapping in the wind. There was a brooding look in his eyes as he pursed his blood-red lips like a true royal prince. The whole time, he never looked away from the teenage girl, who was covered in blood. His hands were clenched into fists. In the arena, Feng Wu looked coldly at Xian Yuan-yi. Without the old man's help, Xian Yuan-yi swayed back and forth, as if all his strength had left him. Feng Wu would never give him another chance. She charged toward him like a cheetah, and the blade of her sword glinted coldly. Whoosh! Xian Yuan-yi's head rolled down from his shoulders and fell to the ground. Everyone was astonished. They had expected that Xian Yuan-yi would lose, but they didn't expect Feng Wu to take action so soon. A hush fell over the crowd. The next moment, the Xian Yuan family exploded. "Feng Wu! How dare you kill him?" Chapter 1197 Untitled. Chapter 1197 Untitled. The Xian Yuan family wouldn't have it. Many rushed toward the stage and tried to attack Feng Wu. However, before they could reach the platform, something suddenly happened. There was a gust of cold wind, and the Xian Yuan family seemed to freeze on the spot. They stood there, as motionless as sculptures. "Go away!" Jun Linyuan bellowed. The next moment, the members of the Xian Yuan family were all thrown out of Imperial College. The crowd was speechless. They knew that the Xian Yuan family was doomed. Xian Yuan Kuan, the backbone of the Xian Yuan family, was dead. So was Xian Yuan-yi, the most promising youth of the family. Instantly, everyone gave the teenage girl, who was covered in blood, strange looks. Blood covered her from head to toe, and even her thin lips seemed to be bleeding. Standing there on bare feet in a pool of blood, she looked like a tender flower bud growing out of blood. She stood proudly in the wind, looking fragile but unrestrained. Thump! After winning the duel, Feng Wu felt completely drained. She felt like an empty hole. The next moment, she fell backward without warning. "Xiao Wu!" Chaoga and Qiuling ran toward Feng Wu, ready to catch her. However, one person moved faster than either of them, and that man was His Royal Highness. Everyone watched this in astonishment. The breathtakingly beautiful Crown Prince moved so fast that it almost seemed inconceivable. He pulled Feng Wu into his arms before anyone else could get to her. Into his arms. What Jun Linyuan did practically frightened the audience to death. Especially the Empress Dowager. The crowd watched with their mouths wide open. Empress Dugu and Jun Wuxia were so shocked that their jaws went slack. The Empress Dowager was the most shocked of them all. Her eyes opened so wide that they almost popped out. What's going on?" She looked baffled. Lady Northern Feng and Feng Sun were the most unperturbed of all of them, because they knew all along how Jun Linyuan felt about Feng Wu. Taking Lady Northern Feng's hand, the Empress Dowager stared at the stage with trembling lips. "Ya, tell me, what's going on?" Lady Northern Feng had no choice but to feign a bewildered tone. "I think His Royal Highness is just being nice." Nice. Jun Linyuan wasn't capable of being nice. However, at that moment, Jun Linyuan picked Feng Wu up in both arms. She had fainted from exhaustion, and he carried her off. He was gone. Those who were left behind stared at each other in bewilderment. The crowd was speechless. What did I just see? Did His Royal Highness carry Feng Wu away? Why would His Royal Highness do that? What's Feng Wu to His Royal Highness? It couldn't be any more obvious, but no one wanted to admit the truth. Because if it was true, a lot of girls would be so devastated that they might kill themselves. At that thought, Many turned to the Empress Dowager with pleading looks on their faces. The Empress Dowager was as baffled as they were. More than that, however, she was furious. "That's impossible." The old lady smacked the table. "The Crown Prince would never like a girl like that. This has to be a mistake." She added, "Even if the Crown Prince really is in love with her, I'll never let it happen." Hearing that, many people heaved sighs of relief. Chapter 1198 Untitled. Chapter 1198 Untitled. Jun Linyuan carried Feng Wu away. He rode as fast as he could, and before long, he arrived at his own residence. Feng and Granny Gong stood outside the front gate as usual to greet the Crown Prince. Behind them were 2 long rows of servants and maids, whose heads were lowered as they welcomed the Crown Prince respectfully. Jumping off the horse, Jun Linyuan tossed his whip to Feng, then carried Feng Wu all the way to his bedchamber. With Feng Wu in his arms, he acted as though no one else existed in this world. He left as fast as he had arrived, like a gust of wind. However, the 2 rows of servants and maids had astonishment written all over their faces. They knew about the interactions between the Crown Prince and Miss Feng Wu, but this was the first time that he had made his attitude toward her so clear. Miss Feng Wu. The crowd eyed one another in bewilderment, and didn't know what to do. Feng glanced at them coldly and said indifferently, "Mind your own business." "Yes." Once the servants were gone, Feng and Granny Gong exchanged intrigued looks. Their Crown Prince finally knew how to do the right thing. How amazing! However, the 2 of them might have celebrated a little too early. Jun Linyuan carried Feng Wu into the hot spring, which was filled with mist. He used one hand to send continuous streaks of spiritual essence into Feng Wu's body. Feng Wu was so drained that she felt as dry as hay. However, with the help of the dense spiritual essence, she began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed forever before Feng Wu woke up in bed. The garden outside was full of plants and the sun was warm overhead. Sunlight poured into the room through an open window, illuminating the floor. Feng Wu's mind was completely blank, but slowly, memories came back to her. She remembered the battle and Xian Yuan Yi, whom she had killed with her sword. So, she had won the duel. Feng Wu smiled, pleased. Luckily, Jun Linyuan had helped her with her training the night before. Otherwise, she would have been the one lying dead there. At that thought, Feng Wu was impressed by Jun Linyuan, and thought that she should express her gratitude to him. When she got out of bed, Feng Wu realized in surprise that she was filled with spiritual energy to the point that it was spilling over. How did that happen? Feng Wu was confused. She remembered that she had exhausted her spiritual essence after the battle with Xian Yuan Yi. It had left her worn out and with a pounding head and cramping muscles. How could she have recovered already? Wait, she even had more spiritual essence than before. That was impossible. Feng Wu was utterly confused. Had she been unconscious for so long that she had recovered all by herself? "Miss Feng, you're awake." Granny Gong showed up with 4 maids. Granny Gong. Feng Wu remembered the old maid, who had been kind to her. "Why am I here?" This was Jun Linyuan's residence. Granny Gong smiled behind her palm. "Miss Feng, can't you remember anything at all?" Feng Wu shook her head in confusion. Granny Gong knew everything. As the Crown Prince's great help, Granny Gong wouldn't miss this great chance to praise her master in front of Feng Wu. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.